Hello and welcome. There it is, the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and joining me as he does every Sunday night, Fantasy Life's finest, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. Dwain, happy week 2, my friend. Oh my goodness, hot start. I can't hear you. This is great. Dwain, are you on mute?
Yeah, here we are. Got me?
There we go. Now I can hear you.
My bad. No,
No.
No, I said, yeah, we had week 1. We thought we knew things. Then week 2 happened. We knew nothing. We knew nothing. Like there's a lot, man, that happened today that was, we get carried away with one data point. Like it's the only data point we have. We get excited about it. And we've been waiting the whole time. But now we still don't have that many data points, but we have 2. So at least we can compare them.
We had 0, we have 1, now we got 2. So let's go ahead and discuss that second data point that we now have at the table. As always, great day to be great, and appreciate you guys all tuning in. Jets beat the Browns, and just one of many freaking classics that we had today. I mean, they always talk about the witching hour when the fourth quarter comes along on NFL Red Zone. It was getting feisty once again, both slates. Jets 31, Browns 30. Jets covered as 6.5-point dogs. The over cashed at 39. So just real quick, some highlights. Joe Flacco, 307 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dwain, this dude's had like 5 spot starts now over the last 2.5 years. He's putting up numbers. Again, 307 and 4 touchdowns today. Last week, he was at 309 yards and a touchdown. The 3 previous starts before that, multiple touchdowns in each and every appearance. So Joe Flacco, maybe he's not the most elite quarterback ever these days, but the man does know how to get some numbers up there. Style points be damned, but the real star of the day. Just maybe someone that actually was both of our wide receiver ones, Dwain, going into the dynasty side of things. But Garrett Wilson, fantastic performance, 8 catches, 102 yards, and a pair of scores. Just looked unguardable throughout most of the afternoon out there. I mean, could have even had a 3rd touchdown earlier on in the game in the second, but Flacco couldn't quite put it on him. So fantastic stuff from Garrett Wilson, really being the heart and soul of that Jets passing game. Again, mentioned he could have even had a 3rd touchdown, but you know what? 102 yards and 2 scores. We'll take it. Now, Dwain maybe didn't exactly pull away from this, 4 wide receiver rotation that Jets continue to work with. But I think this is a good example of a rookie going out there doing the damn thing he was drafted for. Should only see bigger and better things from Garrett in terms of a utilization standpoint moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did take a step forward. Last week, he was around 50% route participation. This week, he was at 76%. So, I mean, he was pretty much one of the main 3 receivers on the field. Elijah Moore was still out there the most, 94%. Elijah Moore is still going to be fine, folks. He's a really good receiver. Don't forget what Elijah Moore was last year. We're at week 2. Like, this happens. Like, we can't have 2, receivers be like, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, like every game. So a lot of times whenever you have 2 really good guys, it's a little bit of back and forth. The positive is it does look like Garrett Wilson is going to be that other guy. Corey Davis was still out there for 76% of the routes as well. This was a trailing game script for the most part for the Jets, so they did have to use 3 wide receivers more. But what was nice is Braxton Berrios was only out there for 22% of the routes. If you're from the Braxton Berrios family, you don't think that's a nice thing. But if you're not and you drafted Garrett Wilson, you should be excited. He was out there and he saw 35% target share, Ian, 38% target rate or targets per route run, 2.76 yards per route run. It was an absolute monster day all the way around for Garrett Wilson. And that's 2 weeks in a row that he's led the team in targets per route run. So this is a guy, to your point, that I think he will only be getting more and more involved.
Running back usage was actually a little bit problematic. We have Michael Carter leading the way unofficially with the snap counts. Our lovely PFF team still grinding all this stuff. But as the time that I pulled it, Michael Carter led the way, 61% snaps, 7 carries, 5 targets. Breece Hall, 26% snaps, 7 carries, 1 target. Ty freaking Johnson. Got to get him involved, Dwain. You trade up for Breece Hall. Got to get Ty Johnson on the field for 20% of the snaps. So we always say it, man. We can live with 2 running back committees in the year 2022. 3 or 4 are when things get problematic. So Ty wasn't out there in week 1. Maybe this is another instance of it's just one data point, and we're not really going to have to worry about him. But like, this is the shit that the Patriots do, Dwain, that it gets annoying when you have someone out there taking 20, 25% snaps. No, we don't care about Ty Johnson, but because if he's going to be in there making this a 3-way committee, even if he's clearly the number 3 guy in it, it's going to be awfully difficult to get Carter or Hall above the RB3 territory really throughout the whole season if this is what they're going to keep doing.
Yeah, and it really hurt Breece Hall the most because he lost some of that passing down work. The long down and distance, 64% of those snaps went to Ty Johnson. 32% of the 2-minute offense went to Ty Johnson. So Michael Carter still stayed out there for 53% of that 2-minute offense, but Breece Hall really was cut across the board. 27% snaps, as you mentioned. You look at his long down and distance, only 18%, 16%. And what does that mean? That means you're only out there for 20% of the routes. 20% route participation just isn't going to do it for a guy like Breece Hall, where we really need him involved in the passing game to help offset the fact that Michael Carter's really leading the way on the ground. Now, the splits did get a little bit closer as far as the rushing attempts. 43% of the rushing attempts to Michael Carter, 33% to Breece Hall. So I'm with you. It's like, let's just kind of step back and monitor it. But Ty Johnson is a receiving back. So to see him getting used in this exact way, it is kind of worrisome. Like, are they, he's probably one of these guys that just always looks good at practice, and they're like, well, crap, like, we got to give him, what are we doing if we don't just go ahead and get him to run? You know how it goes. I mean, whenever these coaches see guys like really working hard, and Ty Johnson, he's never truly been in someone that we could depend on in fantasy or broke out. But he has some nice traits, man. Like, he's a nice receiving back. Like, at one point we thought, well, maybe Ty Johnson could be a sleeper. But right now, to your point, it's just really more of a pain, in the butt, because it's really hurting Breece Hall.
With the Browns, I mean, this one really hurts them not to get the win, because Jacoby Brissett played really well out there. I mean, 22 for 27, 229 yards and a touchdown, several off-script plays that we've seen him make periodically throughout his career, but this was one of the really good games you'll get occasionally from Jacoby Brissett. So as someone that's, used my platform here to say, some, I think, objectively correct things, but probably not the nicest things about Jacoby Brissett throughout the offseason. Great game from Jacoby, and could have been even bigger. I mean, he had a dime to Donovan Peoples-Jones in the end zone where, unfortunately, DPJ just couldn't get his feet in bounds. Also, the David Njoku was open in the back of the end zone. Jacoby put it right on him, just couldn't get, his second foot down despite actually catching the ball, and Jacoby doing everything he needed to. So the best thing, Dwain, I thought that we saw from Jacoby was that maybe Amari Cooper, maybe we don't have to actually just completely quit on Amari Cooper this year. We talked about how last week, I mean, Amari only had the 17 yards, but you actually watched the game. You could see what he was doing in terms of just the route running ability, drawing penalties all over the place. This one caught 9 of 10 targets for 101 yards and a touchdown. Hey, this is still a situation where Jacoby threw 27 passes. I know the Browns aren't going to be going out of their way to feed Cooper, week in and week out in this run first offense. But at a minimum, Dwain, upside wide receiver 3 territory, as we start to see some of these other guys in that range, the Elijah Moores of the world, maybe not be kind of clear-cut number ones that we thought they were going to be in their offense. Maybe Amari Cooper does still have a little something for us here in the year 2022.
Yeah, I mean, out there, 37% target share, 91% route participation. So, I mean, he just needs, Jacoby Brissett to be good. I mean, he needs Jacoby Brissett to have games like this. And if he does, we know that Amari Cooper's capable. He's not going to be this dominant every game. We've seen him long enough in his career to know that, this is not really his wheelhouse, but he has games like this, right? He's really more of a 21, 22%, target rate kind of guy, not a 34%er, but he is good enough to have these type of games, especially whenever, you get him out there against a cornerback that, just maybe hasn't seen some of what Amari's got, very, very good route runner, great releases, can definitely turn someone around. So I thought that was positive for him. As far as the tight ends, David Njoku was actually out there 85% of the routes. So I know we were a little bit worried last week with a 72% routes per drop back. To see that back up at 85% was really nice. You did still see Harrison Bryant involved a little bit, but it wasn't at the expense of Njoku, at least from a route participation standpoint. Harrison Bryant demanding targets maybe isn't a good thing for Njoku, but he was still almost at a 20% target share, 19%. So he was second on the team behind Amari Cooper today.
I did see that Harrison Bryant was listed on Don Best injuries as having a head injury, so didn't actually see that happen during the game. I'm not sure if, it got listed at one point and came back in, but keep an eye on that, because obviously if we remove Harrison Bryant from the equation now, going to be a lot easier to expect, 6+ targets each and every week out there for David Njoku. 3 touchdown day from Nick Chubb. Obviously, could have maybe gotten the Browns a victory if he decided not to go in for that third one and just down the ball. But I don't know. Course of the play right now. I mean, I'm not going to hold it against him. I probably blame the defense for giving up 17 points in the fourth quarter before I go and blame Nick Chubb for scoring too many touchdowns. Kareem Hunt didn't find the end zone, but still out there. 46% snaps, 15 combined rush attempts and targets. There'll be better days for him moving forward. Next matchup. Pretty damn entertaining one. One of these games that I think we looked at as a sneaky shootout coming in. weren't necessarily getting that in the first half from one side, but by the end of it, we were. Washington loses to the Lions 36-27. Lions cover as 1-point home dogs by the time things close. Over cashes at 48.5. So DeAndre Swift, we heard about a pitch count potentially coming in, and that did come to fruition. Only 5 carries in this one. Luckily, one of those carries went for 50 yards, as he's been doing now back-to-back weeks. Also only caught, 2 catches. Good news is one of them went for a 22-yard touchdown. Dude, it was like a 3rd and 15. They just flipped it out to Swift in the flat. Like, there was no block in there for this to be a touchdown. If that dude was hurt, like, I could not tell. I mean, I know he was hurt. I'm not trying to call him soft or anything like that, but like, he looked freaking great out there. So hopefully Swift, really was an injury that clearly he wasn't worried about during the week, and we'll just see bigger and better things moving on. But Dwain, even with all that said, we did get the 51% team high snap rate from DeAndre Swift, similar to what we were talking about with the Jets. We do have one Craig Reynolds now factoring in a little bit. These 3 running back committees, not exactly what we're looking for. How worried are you about someone named Craig Reynolds now actually making this, 3 running backs per week instead of 2?
Not really. I think he was just out there because DeAndre Swift was on a pitch count. I think that's really all it was.
Cool.
I mean, so when you look at Swift, he only took 21% of the rushing attempts. So that was way down from last week. So that's where they tried to protect him. But he was still out there for 93% of the long down and distance work and 100% of the 2-minute offense. So that got him up to 57% route participation. Not quite where we saw him last week, but that's still really healthy. If you look at Craig Reynolds, where did he come in and help? He picked up a few of the carries, 13% of the rushing attempts for the team. Jamal Williams was still at 50%. Jamal Williams took all of the short down and distance work. So he still looks fine. I think it's really just DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams once, as long as both backs are healthy. But it's worth noting, like, if something does happen, one of these guys goes down, the next guy we should be thinking about, if we're going to stash someone, would be Craig Reynolds.
By the way, Swift did not lead the Lions in rushing. That was the sun god himself, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just another massive performance. I said it on the last week podcast, Dwayne. Even got, for once, a quote tweet I was kind of happy with, one of the graphics. And it was basically like last week. I said, how many times does Amon-Ra St. Brown need to be a wide receiver 1 until we just start treating him as a wide receiver 1? He was my PPR wide receiver 12 last week, and that's probably going to be low compared to what I rank him at this week. 9 catches, 116 yards, 2 scores through the air, another 68 yards on the ground, mostly of that coming on a 58-yard fly sweep where he just freaking did Amon-Ra St. Brown thing. So incredible game. Once again, an incredible game from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Per field, the AT has now tied the NFL record with at least 8 catches in 8 straight games. Right now, Cooper Kupp with 8 straight games with a touchdown, the only one beating Amon-Ra's current streak of 6 straight games with a touchdown. Seriously, Dwayne, full PPR. I don't think we should continue to use 2 hands to count the number of wide receivers to rank ahead of Amon-Ra every week.
I have him at 8 this week.
Let's go.
I mean, I've already moved on. Like, look, I mean, now he's at 8 games in a row of 30% plus target share. I mean, it goes hand in hand with, the thing from Field Yates. Yeah, dude, he's ridiculous. He's one of the best receivers in the league. He's in a great scheme. Jared Goff wants to throw the ball to him. I mean, I know we joked around and said, who's this year's Cooper Kupp? And everybody's like, no one. The answer is no one. There's not going to be someone like that. Well, actually, the name was just Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is this year's Cooper Kupp. Like, he really is, man. Like, that's what we're dealing with here.
Again, great game from Amon-Ra. We did still see some of the other receivers flash a little bit. Josh Reynolds caught a touchdown. DJ Chark got really close to having a good one. So they actually ran a cool trick play off of flea flicker. I don't want to call it a drop necessarily. Sometimes it's tough to tell if the cornerback got their hand in there at the last second or not. But 35 yards, the play was set up well. Drop, great defensive play, whatever you want to call it. Would have been a lot cooler if that was a touchdown. And then he missed him on the other one.
Deep crosser, yeah.
Bad before the half. Like, you saw the middle linebacker trying to do his Tampa 2 thing, just get completely lost there in the middle of the field. Unfortunately, Goff just couldn't put it on Chark. So Chark really could have had, an extra 80 yards in the score with just a little bit more luck there. Also, Carson Wentz, Antonio Gibson, as we transition over to Washington, got stuff just short of the goal line on another one of those drives. But Carson Wentz really was the tale of 2 halves for him. First half, couldn't get anything going. We were getting, same old Wentz tweets going out there and everything. But by the end of the game, man, 337 passing yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. From 2016 to 2021, so Wentz's entire Philadelphia Eagles career, and then what he did with the Colts. He had 4 games in that entire freaking 5-year period, 6-year period with 300 plus passing yards and 3 plus passing touchdowns. He's now done it in back-to-back weeks with Washington. These wide receivers are loaded everywhere, Dwayne. And hey, so a guy that we were high on throughout the offseason, saying use him with your last pick, one Curtis Samuel. He's getting the designed freaking touches in this, and that's the wild part to me, because while I'll still take, Terry McLaurin over Curtis in terms of who's the better football player, Jahan Dotson's your first round pick. I mean, Curtis is the one getting design stuff in the backfield. Curtis is the one getting matched up on a defensive end while he's running a wheel route, getting the score. He got that like throwback wheel where he gets lost in the shuffle. And oh yeah, look, now there's no one within 30 yards of Curtis when he catches the ball. How many more games, Dwayne, if any, do we need to see before we're ranking Curtis ahead of Terry McLaurin?
Oh man, like that's a tough one, but I feel like they've all got to be close. I mean, I had Samuel inside my top 36 this week, so and he came through again. I mean, they were a lot closer this week. Target share to Curtis Samuel 20%, Terry McLaurin 17%. I think it's one of these situations where we're definitely going to look up, and McLaurin's going to have his day, man. He's going to have a 30%er, and he's going to go off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns with the way this offense is throwing the ball. Like, they're going to be a pass heavy offense. It could look really bad at times, like it did in the first half, and then it could look really good, like it did last game, and then for the second half of this game, and Wentz had some spotty spots last week as well. But what it's showing me is like they're okay with it. Like Ron Rivera, normally kind of a stodgy old defensive coordinator kind of guy. He seems to be okay. He seems to be saying, look, this is what we're going to do. It's our identity. We're going to throw the ball. And it makes sense. I mean, you just said it. Like, they've got the weapons everywhere. And even the guys that are in the backfield, really, that's what they're best at, really, is being receivers. So I think it's a situation where we're just going to have a pass-heavy offense. All of these guys are going to come through. There's going to be weeks where it's not Curtis Samuel, right? And there's going to be weeks where it's going to be Dotson. There'll be weeks where it is Terry McLaurin. So I think it's going to be tough for them to all be awesome, all the time. But right now, like, for where you drafted Terry McLaurin, like, you have to feel just elated. He is the most sewn into the offense, like 70% of the time lining up, from the slot. He gets that short passing stuff, 8 out of only 5.1, where the other guys are working more downfield. So he can also be kind of that security blanket. Yeah, I mean, if you drafted him, man, like, he's easy in most formats. Like, you're easily putting him in your flex.
Running back usage, pretty much as expected. Gibson, 56% snaps. McKissick, 46% because they were trailing. We did see McKissick end up getting the 7 targets, only 4 for Gibson. And once again, man, like, McKissick's earning this. I mean, he had this nice blitz pickup in the first half, just completely stymied that linebacker in the hole. He earned that spot. And this is unfortunately life with Antonio Gibson. When they get up, things look great. When they get down, he's going to be game flow dependent. And this is just until Brian Robinson comes back. It's going to get really gross at that point.
Yeah, this is just a reminder. Like, last week we talked real quick, like we said, hey, 56% route participation last week, but they didn't face a lot of long down and distance. Like, they stayed ahead like all the time. This week they didn't. It drops to 38%. You see JD McKissick, shoot up to 42% of the routes, and it's all because of, what you just mentioned, the game script and just more long down and distance stuff. That puts McKissick on the field a lot more.
Shout out to our YouTube gang from Wrong Speedy. Scary Terry over Bateman rest of the season, Dwayne. Who you got?
I still have Terry McLaurin.
Yeah. Let's face it, though. That Bateman.
I mean, it's all close, though, man. It's really close. Like, it's really close.
It is very close between those two. All right, Buccaneers, Saints, always a wonky matchup here since Tom Brady has gotten into town. Buccaneers take them down, though, 20-10, covering as a 3-point favorite. The under cashes at 43.5. So Brady, just 190 yards and a touchdown, but don't let anyone tell you that, like, all of a sudden, like, father time is catching up to him. He looked fine out there. I mean, the amount of freaking balls that Scotty Miller, if he just wasn't 5'5", like, could have actually caught out there that Brady put really in again, a normal sized human being's catch radius for him. It was wild to see. The touchdown to Brashad Perryman back across the field right into a bucket was awesome. So yeah, not the biggest day, but you know what? You take away Mike Evans for half the game. There's no Chris Godwin. There's no Julio Jones. Russell Gage hasn't really looked like the same guy we saw last year, this entire season at this point. This is Brady without really anyone to throw to. It's what we saw at the end of his career in New England, and he should have guys to throw to. But again, Julio, Godwin, and Mike Evans literally all gone from this game by the end of the third quarter, basically. Just wasn't much going there for Brady. So I'm not going to super overreact to Tom Brady as a fantasy asset moving forward. With that said, Dwayne, I think we need to kind of curtail our expectations if these guys are going to keep missing time. So obviously Mike Evans was out because he decided to go back and do what he does best, and that's get into a fight with Marshawn Lattimore. So once they got ejected from that game, second time in like 5 or 6 years, previously defending Jameis. But after that, again, this offense just really had a hard time moving the ball. So overall level of concern, if any, for this Buccaneers passing game, Dwayne.
Yeah, I think it's mostly tied to the injuries, to your point. So I think once they're healthy, it's fine. But like right now, like I mean, I had Tom Brady as a fade this week, but again, mostly because everybody was dinged up. I didn't know for sure who was going to be available. And I borderline thought about benching him for Wentz, just because I had seen how pass heavy the Commanders' offense was. I didn't, but I think you're kind of in that range now until we see him with the healthy weapons. He's not a must start, right? He's not just a lock every single week. Now, once he has these guys back, there's no way that I would have him on my bench, once we know everybody's healthy.
Leonard Fournette, dominant 86% snap rate, despite, having the hamstring issue coming in. 24 carries, 4 targets. Rachaad White, just 14% of the snaps, 2 carries and 1 target. Rachaad White, still someone you need to keep on your bench. He is one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy football, especially with Giovanni Bernard suffering an ankle injury in this one. But yeah, for now, Leonard Fournette, the only running back that you can even think about putting into a starting lineup. Also note from Jay Glazer before the game, as we move on to the New Orleans Saints, Jameis Winston has 4 fractures in his back. The man's going to play through it. And Alvin Kamara has a fractured rib cartilage that has kept him out of this one. So keeping in mind that Jameis has the broken back, as Mike Tyson would say, spinal, broken back. It was a terrible performance. This was vintage Jameis out here, Dwain. I mean, some of the fourth quarter picks we had going there, taking 6 sacks. It was not pretty. And oh my goodness, does Jameis love throwing deep to Chris Olave. So I think my first study, because again, these PFF stats are changing a little bit throughout the game. I looked earlier and had him for 14 targets, and that had him around like 350 air yards. When
it was 365. And they took a target away.
Now he's at 320. Either way,
yeah.
Man. Like I can't ever remember. It has happened a few times. I forget who the other examples were, but I can't remember being on this podcast with you, Dwain, ever mentioning someone with an air yard total starting with a 3 going to the game. Unfortunately for Olave, he only caught 5 of them for 80 yards. I wouldn't call these just like complete prayer, no chance, passes though. Like he was loose for a potential 68-yarder. Jamel Dean fell down. It was just barely an overthrow. And then later he actually does catch this 51-yard pass, but they ruled him not down yet, and he made a football move by kind of keeping himself up, and he ended up fumbling it. So he didn't get the 2 points there. So still 5 catches for 80 yards for Chris Olave. I don't know, though, Dwayne. We saw in week 1 how easily this passing game could go back towards Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. I think Olave is someone that you love seeing this. You love seeing the air yards, but it's going to be tough to really treat him as more, I think, than a boom or bust flex until we see, 1, a little bit more consistency out of Jameis. This could be a year-long thing that we're waiting for there. But 2, I'm just not completely convinced after 1 week that Olave is all of a sudden going to lap Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry in terms of total pass game opportunities.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to lap them, but I feel much better about him. I mean, he's been out there for over an 80% route participation both of the weeks. This week, he was second to Michael Thomas. He was ahead of Jarvis Landry. They do some weird things where whenever they're in certain personnel groupings, they're still like letting Marquez Callaway get routes, Deontay Hardy. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. It's kind of like the Ty Johnson version, right? Yeah. For receivers, having to deal with some of these other guys getting on the field, but it's like certain packages, right? When they're coming out in 12 and things like that. But yeah, with Olave, I mean, still though, 33% target share, 2 yards per route run, 62% of the air yards. You already mentioned how many. It was a huge number. I also do not remember a time. I don't remember a time seeing a number that high. Like his ADOT was 24.6. So when you get 13 targets times the 24.6, like it really does work out. But I'm bullish though. I mean, to see a guy getting this many targets this early, he's already staying on the field pretty much all the time with the starters. I think he's definitely going to have his games, and I would prefer him over Jarvis Landry right now. I think it's Mike Thomas and Olave. That'd be the 2 that I would really want to be rolling with. Landry may still come back and have his games. I just prefer their upside because they can both work further down the field. Olave can come through with the big play. Mike Thomas, we know, is really the favorite in the end zone. We've already seen that 2 weeks in a row where like he's just the preferred dude. Like when they're down there, Jameis is going to Michael Thomas.
Speaking of Michael Thomas, caught another touchdown, 3 on the season. Got it against his kryptonite, Carlton Davis out there. It was, kind of just a laser, and he got banged around there. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Thomas dominated Carlton or anything. But another week, man, with another big-time performance. So I went back and actually looked now. Michael Thomas has had 12 games without Drew Brees since 2019. In those 12 games, catching passes from Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, and Taysom Hill. Guys that I don't think were necessarily given, the most respect around the league for their ability to throw the ball. 7.8 catches, 92 yards, 0.5 touchdowns per game. You extrapolate that over 17, 132 catches, 1,565 yards, and 9 touchdowns. can't guard Mike, and the guy's been doing it on way more than just slants right now. So just hop on. Hopefully you got Michael Thomas in round 5 or 6. Like Dwayne, I was waiting just maybe like I wanted one more data point on Michael Thomas because just we knew he was still coming back a little bit. I knew this was going to be a tough matchup. Are we back in top 12, top 15? Are we there?
I had him at top 16, I believe, this last week. He might have been 17. So, yeah, I mean, he's just going to keep climbing. And, I mean, I wrote about it over at FantasyLife. Like, look, he's already moved into the mid-range wide receiver 2s. If he has another game like this, like, he could be on his way into wide receiver 1 territory. So, I think we're right there at it. I don't think there's any way he's not firmly in the top end of the wide receiver 2s, and it may come down to matchups, right? For right now, deciding if he's a wide receiver 1 or not. He's not quite where we got Amon-Ra, but I mean, dude, it's looking really, really good. A 23% target share this week. You know, we already saw him at almost a 30% last week. And he may not even be fully healthy yet. Like, so, and you know, he's still getting his groove with Jameis. So yeah, I like Michael Thomas a lot.
Tony Jones Jr. ended up leading the New Orleans Saints backfield. We didn't have Latavius Murray out there. Again, Kamara missed a game with a rib issue. Mark Ingram did lead the way with 10 rush attempts. Showed a little more juice than I was expecting early on. Did lose a fumble, though. And, yeah, I mean, 38% snaps without Alvin Kamara out there. I don't think Mark Ingram is someone that, like, okay, Dwayne, we're in the 14-team league with 3 flexes. There are going to be situations where, you know, if Kamara's out and you just need your 10 to 12 carries and targets, okay, I'm not saying you can't play Mark Ingram, but this isn't the backup running back that I think has a sort of upside where you need to keep on your roster. Guys like Rachaad White and stuff need to be on a million more rosters than Mark Ingram at this point. I would say just, you know, Baltimore and New Orleans, as long as Dobbins and Kamara are out, I'm fine just staying away.
Yeah, I would have been fine with Ingram if we saw him like it was last year, you know. But even then, like, just can he stay healthy, you know, at his age? But yeah, it was Tony Jones out there in the trailing script. He had 50% of the long down and distance and 78% of the 2-minute offense. So he kind of played more of the Kamara role, and Ingram, you know, played the old Ingram role. He had 53% of the rushing attempts, but just not involved in the passing game.
New York Giants took down the Carolina Panthers 19-16, covering as a 1-point dog. The under cash rather easily at 43.5. This is a pretty boring one, Dwayne. I went through, you know, I keep notes throughout the day. This wasn't one of the 3 games I was kind of really watching, hoping to see every play. But, you know, with the red zone on there, I like to think I see most of it. Yeah, my only notes was like, nice 50-yard run, CMC. That was it. Baker, terrible. Daniel Jones, terrible. Like, once again, way too much Richie James for anyone's liking other than the James family. Yeah, Saquon ended up getting, you know, a volume-induced game that didn't completely kill you, but you're not exactly calling home about it. The only real notable thing was Christian McCaffrey getting those 102 rushing yards. The man has now gone 24 consecutive non-injured games with at least 100 yards and or scoring a touchdown. Only sheesh in this one was the Carolina defense. Actually, they had an easy pick 6 chance on Daniel Jones before the half. Just couldn't get it going. So in terms of the usage, Saquon, workhorse, Christian McCaffrey, workhorse, 86 and 93% snap rates for these guys. I will not be surprised at all if those are the 2 highest single game marks of week 2. Any thoughts on here, Dwayne? We can make this a quick one.
No, those are both the every down backs. The one other player I would just mention is Sterling Shepard. We saw him kind of break in last week, you know, coming off the Achilles. You know, we were like, well, Cam Akers' Achilles didn't look good. Well, Sterling Shepard and James Robinson both have looked good after the Achilles injury. And Sterling Shepard's was really late in the year, but 91% route participation, 32% target share, 44% of the air yards, with lining up all over the field, not just in the slot, obviously, right? If you're going to be out there 91% of the routes, you're out there, you know, for pretty much every type of personnel that you're running in the game. So Sterling Shepard is a guy I know we kind of dismissed, but now it's kind of like, well, they seem pretty intent on not really using a lot of these other guys that they're just rotating. I think Toney did resuffer another injury, but he wasn't really getting used that much. He was only out there 38% of the snaps. So Sterling Shepard, a guy just to remember. David Sills was also out there, but we'll just kind of leave that one alone. Shepard, if I was messing with anyone else from the Giants for like a wide receiver 4 type, especially once bye weeks get here, he might be able to give you a little something.
Kenny Galloday apparently cleaned out his locker after the game. That was a pretty funny tweet to see coming across the old timeline.
3% of snaps, dude.
Did we get? Yeah, it's ridiculous, but like I don't really blame them. Did you actually like see or hear Kadarius re-aggravated something?
Yeah, I read something, but it wasn't like a big official tweet.
Okay. I saw they were getting him involved early, so I would have been kind of surprised to see that snap rate if he didn't suffer something.
Yeah. It was in response to something that I sent. One of the fans were like,
Oh,
"Hey, Toney tweaked something." So I haven't been able to research it since then.
I saw the most ridiculous Giants tweet from this week where it's like he's been on the injury report an overwhelming amount of the weeks that he's even been in the league. And then like the games he hasn't been on the injury report, he's like come out there and usually gotten hurt. Guy just cannot stay healthy. I don't think you need to keep Toney on teams, Dwayne. I would like to, but it's going to get to the point where it's going to be really tough here pretty soon if we're not already there.
Yeah, when injuries and bye weeks strike, like you're going to be forced into these situations. But he's always a player that I would say you're 100% keeping on, speed dial, right, for your waivers. Like he's a guy that, like, if you hear any positive news, like, and you can find a way to get him on your roster, you will. And I would also say, like, if you've got a really running back heavy team for some reason, and someone in your league cuts Toney, and let's say, not talking about an 8-team league, not a 10-team league, we're talking 12-team leagues here, with deeper benches, and you need some upside, I still wouldn't be afraid to stash him. But to your point, I think we're getting to the spot for most leagues that the general folks are going to be playing in. It's not like it's not a must hold anymore on Toney.
It's like Brandon Ayuk last year. Like we know the top talents there, and Toney wasn't even. We had a larger sample size of Brandon Ayuk, so chill out, 49ers fans and Brandon Ayuk stands out there. But when we're getting now weeks of data points telling us that he's not involved in the offense, and the difference, and it's also a run heavy offense, but it's also not nearly as efficient as the 49ers. Yeah, certainly not someone you absolutely positively need to keep on the roster at this point. Very sad compared to the conversations we were having about the guy just a couple weeks ago. New England Patriots took down the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-14. Brings us to our sleeper of the day, powered by Sleeper, my single favorite place to play redraft fantasy football. Love you guys over at Sleeper. Nelson Agholor, Dwayne, not dropping babies, just catching touchdowns out here. In fact, caught all 6 of his targets, 110 yards in his score. Beautiful 44-yard touchdown. Absolutely mossed the dude trying to get back there in coverage. Nice enough ball from Mac Jones to give him a chance out there. So great stuff from Agholor. Someone that just can't win. He comes out as a rookie. He disappoints for Philly. His Super Bowl year, I mean, they were really using him as a yak monster. Okay, things go south. Then we got the meme. Then he goes to the Raiders, and he was actually legitimately Derek Carr's number 1 receiver in 2020 and did a lot of good things. Got paid by New England and didn't do anything. New England, but Agholor is now done pretty damn good in back-to-back weeks, and we heard all throughout training camp that he was the best player at Patriots training camp. But if you get a Patriots report and it's not a fluff piece about Ramondre Stevenson, there's a good chance you're never going to hear about it, out there in the Twitter streets. So anything with Nelson Agholor that we can get behind here, Dwayne, is he separating on terms of a route basis from Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne, or is this just kind of, broke clock is right twice a day type of thing?
Yeah, Bourne's really the odd player out, only 58% route participation. Agholor did bump up to 75%, right there with Devontae Parker at 73%. And then you've got Jacoby Myers at 83%. So they're kind of rotating, all these guys. Myers also had a really nice week, 39% target share. I'm just at the point where it's like Jacoby Myers is the only player I'm interested in having in the passing game, for the Patriots. 13 targets, 9 receptions, 95 yards. I know Agholor came through with the 6, for 110 and the touchdown. And it was a beautiful catch. Like that was something I honestly didn't know Agholor had in his bag. So it was really cool to see. But at the end of the day, I feel like the rest of this is just going to be something we're going to be like, we're never going to feel good about who we're starting. I think the only one, like I said, is Jacoby Myers, where you're like, consistently he should be part of the offense. And even with him, the upside is a bit capped.
9 catches, 95 yards on 13 targets today for Jacoby, eating over the intermediate areas of the field since week 1 last year. So the Mac Jones era, and the offense hasn't changed that much. They added Devontae Parker, they lost N'Keal Harry, but most of the guys that are getting targets last year are still the same guys we're expecting to this year. And just total target leaders. Number 1 is Jacoby Myers with 149. Number 2 is Hunter Henry with 82 targets, Dwayne. We're talking a 67 target difference between these guys. I mean, full PPR, Jacoby, always one of those targets. Now, unfortunately, we asked in the offseason, what if Jacoby Myers starts scoring touchdowns? Haven't gotten to that pipe dream just yet, but at a minimum, full PPR, one of those wide receivers that I think consistently it's going to be hard to have too far outside of that wide receiver 3 range just because of this volume on his plate. Now, we did get an injury here at the end. Damian Harris suffered a leg injury. Not sure on the severity. He did go out there, have a nice game for himself, 71 yards and a score on 15 touches. Had another chance to get in the end zone earlier, but got stopped at the 1-yard line. does give Ramondre Stevenson the chance to now take over. These victory laps are going to be unsufferable, Dwayne, because the amount of injuries, the amount of retirements that have had to go right for this to happen. And hey, luck, putting yourself in the right opportunity, that's fine. Let's just keep in mind kind of what has happened to get us here. The James White retirement, Ty Montgomery IR, now apparently Damian Harris being out of the picture. And we don't have to worry about JJ Taylor or Kevin Harris for the time being. So if, Dwayne, we enter next week with Amon-Ra Stevenson, RB1, and only Pierre Strong to really speak of elsewhere on this roster. And Pierre Strong playing through a shoulder injury. So I don't even think he's necessarily out there and being, given the chance to do all that much. Like, this is the point where Ramondre is going to be, an upside RB2 probably as soon as next week, if Damon Harris is for sure out.
Yeah, he'll be a high-end RB2. If Damian Harris is out, I mean, it's going to be hard to not have him in your top 12. He's just going to get – at that point, there's so many people hurt, right? But we probably wouldn't, just because it still is the Patriots, and you never can for sure trust it. You would have to make him more of a high-end RB2, to your point, because I don't know. Just saying, like, any Patriots back as an RB1 and ranking them that way, like, just kind of gives, like, chills down my spine, of all the people that are going to be, like, with pitchforks coming after you later in the day. Hey, you idiot, why did you believe it? You're right. Like, it is always a committee. But the positive thing for Stevenson, even before that injury, which was at the very end of the game, and Damian Harris did say he was fine after the game. He was interviewing with the reporters. Now we'll see what that means. But the positive for Stevenson, 100% of the 2-minute offense. So with having Ty Montgomery gone, he was much more involved. Now, he didn't get many targets. He only had a 3% target share on the day, but there'll be better days ahead if he's going to get that. And he was almost at 60% of the long down and distance work as well. So it was really now only 32% of the rushing attempts. So it really was more of Damian Harris being the early down back and mixing in a little bit on the passing downs, but really mostly Ramondre Stevenson taking all the passing down works and then just getting a few carries, sprinkled in. So I think that's what the roles could still look like, which that alone, makes Ramondre Stevenson more of an upside, RB3, even if we're dealing with Damian Harris.
Mitch Trubisky, it's hard to say too many nice things when you average 5.1 yards per attempt. He hit a couple of those.
Mitch Trubisky, 100% snap rate. Moving on.
There we go. He did hit a couple of those old honey hole throws I like to talk about, Dwayne. George Pickens for 23 yards and had a nice one. Deontae close. But yeah, it was mostly bad out here until we get Kenny Pickett, if and when. And maybe it's not going to be a matter of if this year based on some of the reports that I think Jay Glazer floated out about Pittsburgh really wanting to stick with Trubisky for his entire season. It's just going to be tough to get behind Claypool or George Pickens. What the hell, man? Every single practice, like it was like the Brian Edwards, like T.O., Randy Moss hybrid. That was how George Pickens was being made out to be. That's how he looked with everything we saw. But the guy's getting 3 targets. Like Mitch said after last game that he wanted to get him more involved. He said after this game he wants to get him more involved. At this point, though, beyond Deontae Johnson, I just think it's tough to trust anyone in this passing game. Chase Claypool, 0 carries a week after he was seemingly vying for the team rush lead out there. So Claypool, Pickens, not all that interested in at the moment. But the target hog, Dwayne, that just he's good at football, and shame on me for even doubting him a little bit. Now I had him ranked top 24. Chill the hell out, or I'm not gonna go to jail over this shit. But Deontae Johnson, 24 games, Dwayne, with 10 plus targets since 2020. Only Devontae Adams, who has 19 right now, and Keenan Allen are even close to 20 at this point. So new quarterback, no problem. Same old Deontae Johnson, just demanding targets and really just looking impressive as hell out there. Had an amazing catch on the 2-point conversion. Like he's had to work for these freaking yards these last 2 weeks with some of the balls Mitch has given him. The question is, though, for me, it's just going to be tough for Deontae to really elevate too high because we have the same quarterback problems facing guys like Brandon Cooks, like CeeDee Lamb, like Terry McLaurin, fellow really, really talented wide receiver ones. Unfortunately, they're catching passes from someone that we're not that thrilled about.
Yeah, Deontay is one of the best receivers in the game. Like, I know we kind of debated that. Like, and so for me, the number one thing you want from a receiver is the ability to get open, or that a quarterback is willing to throw them the ball, right? They're demanding targets. And Deontay is one of the best at that, for sure. Like, is he the absolute best once you get the ball to him after the catch? Yeah, he's not on the same level as some of the other guys, but as far as being able to get open and demand those targets, like, he's right there. And obviously that shows, like when you talk about, the games where he's had 10 targets or more, hit 30% target share again today. And we're so used to it. It's kind of like, okay, yawn, like Deontay Johnson saw 30% of the targets again today, but it really is an amazing feat. I do agree. Like, you've just got the situation with the quarterback. It looks like, Terry McLaurin and those guys are going to kind of avoid it. Like, Wentz is playing well enough that it's going to be okay. Mitch Trubisky's not. Mitch Trubisky right now is borderline, like looking terrible, and that's a problem. As far as Pickens goes, he's still out there. But it's really turned into you got Chase Claypool really playing in the slot, handling all the old juju stuff, a 4.8 ADOT. Right, so it's just all the underneath drags, all that kind of stuff. Deontay Johnson doing the same thing he was last year, hasn't really changed, more the intermediate, and he's doing this outside. Deontay doesn't get to play inside and get these 30% target shares. Only in the slot 8% today. He's doing this against the best cornerbacks from the other team and where you can see more coverage. And then you have Pickens is really working down the field, a 28.7 ADOT. So he's eventually going to pop a 34% air yards for the day, out there, 95% route participation. He's going to hit some of these big plays eventually. So he's a guy that I'm definitely keeping on my radar as far as DFS goes.
Definitely. In DFS. That's a great thing about DFS, man. Oh, this week went bad. There's always next week there. There's always next slate there, man, if you really want to get into
it. And he's priced so well. Like I think this week he was 3,700, 3,600 on DraftKings. So he'll probably stay there. But like this shows like he could easily have a week where, it's one of those guys that you'll look up and you'll be like, oh, 3 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that's the kind of week you're going to get from George Pickens here, at some point in the next month.
Speaking of guys that just haven't been able to quite meet some of that wild, some might say irresponsible preseason hype, Matt Ryan. Reggie Wayne was throwing up Dwain because he reminded him so much of Peyton Manning, and he's now 0-1-1 facing the Jaguars and the Texans to start the season. I know there has not been much help. I talked about the 2 drop touchdowns in week 1, Pierce and Doolin. This week, you could argue another one. I mean, Mo Alley Cox only had 1 foot down in the back of the end zone. He looks so big on the play. Like, just side note.
That was a tough one, though. I don't put that one on Mo Alley. I saw that one, but
I'm not necessarily putting it on him, but like Matt Ryan put the ball in Mo Alley Cox's hands in the back of the end.
Fair.
So it was a good throw by Matt Ryan, but yeah, weren't too many of those. 195 yards, not 1, not 2, 3 picks on the day. Last time I checked, he had actually an NFL high now 6 turnover-worthy plays. Can we get an apology letter from Colts brass? I mean, my God, man, just the amount of Wentz slander this entire offseason. And it's tough to, say all that and then have this be what exactly happens to start the year. So whatever, we're talking about the Colts, but at a minimum, just like with Tom Brady and just like any other quarterback who Dak Prescott, you take away all the really good receivers, guess what? It's going to be a lot harder to throw the football. So in this one, no Michael Pittman with the quad, no Alec Pierce with the concussion. And what did that mean? Big game for Paris Campbell? Nope. He didn't have a target until like halfway through the fourth quarter. Ended up being the Ashton Doolin show, if you want to call it that. 5 catches, 79 yards on the team high, 7 targets. The biggest problem, man, was just the inability to get their good players to football. Jonathan Taylor had only 10 combined carries and targets. That's his fewest in a game since week 10 in 2020. Then also Nyheim Hines, Frank Reich. You told us to draft the dude. You said it, fantasy footballers, go get him. What do? You gave him 5 touches in a game that you lost 24-0. If this is not the game that Nyheim Hines catches 10, 12 passes in, when's that going to happen, Dwayne? I don't know if ever. At the end of the day, just 31% snaps for Nyheim Hines, 73% for Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, Taylor's fine. And when Michael Pittman's back in there, we're throwing him in the lineup. Otherwise, Dwayne, I'm not cutting Hines because I still think he has great handcuff value if something happens to Taylor. But do you want to play anyone else on this offense or even think about playing anyone else on this offense?
Yeah, I mean, he's still similar to McKissick, but he has the upside of being a cuff. Like you're not crazy about it. But I mean, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 37 yards. But yeah, it's not like what Frank Reich said. Like, and he started off hot in this game. Like he was looking good. And
the slot. He was getting them, Dwayne, finally.
Yeah, it's like, 2.64 yards per route run, man. Like the dude was looking really good. Targets per route run for Nyheim Hines, 36%. He's an elite back as far as, working as a receiver. Like the dude could get so much more, but the problem is, how do you take Jonathan Taylor off the field? He was still out there 74% of the snaps. So that's the problem for Nyheim Hines. Like even in these games now, to your point, like where they're trailing, like he's not getting everything. Long down and distance, 83% of that still went to Jonathan Taylor. Now he did get 100% of the 2-minute offense, but despite all the time that the Colts were trailing, they only used the 2-minute offense for 5 snaps. What the hell? Like, well, I don't understand. Like, hey, we're losing. Let's keep going really slow. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with their play calling. I'm with you. Nyheim Hines is not a guy that you're trying to force into your lineups. When bye weeks get here, like you might use him, as a flex. But I do still think that he is the contingent upside play with Jonathan Taylor.
Absolutely gross performance. And I think it was, who said this on Twitter? Maybe Might have been Nate Tice. If it wasn't, I apologize. I'm trying to compliment whoever said this, so I'm not shitting on someone I don't remember. But they were saying like a lot of times you see a score like this and it was fluky. Not really. Colts got their ass beat on the line of scrimmage, both sides of the football. Like this was a dominant performance from Jacksonville from the first snap to the last snap. And it's now been something like 6 years since the Colts have won in Jacksonville, which is pretty hilarious to everyone except Colts fans. So sorry, guys.
My Jaguars defense came through in DFS today, Ian.
That's a great day to be great.
There were so many people going off today. You had to have the defense. Like, oh my God. Like there were so many people going nuts.
This is one of those days where like everyone was, just a couple of plays away from, winning the millie because look at all the freaking points being scored. But hey, Trevor Lawrence, pretty damn good game. I was not impressed at all with what he put on the field in week 1, but hey, guess what? He's learning a new offense. He's still just in his second year. Maybe the most heralded prospect since Andrew Luck can still turn out to be pretty damn good. But yeah, 25 for 30, 235 yards, pair of touchdowns. Continuing to show all sorts of chemistry with Christian Kirk out here. Only 6 targets to Kirk, which surprised me, but caught all 6, 78 yards and a pair of touchdowns. And on the season now, man, 2.79 yards per route run for Christian Kirk. That is, beyond elite. That's like top 5 in the league potential if he carries it across the entire season. 7.1 yards after catch per reception with a 10.8 yard average target depth, though, Dwain. That's what's interesting. We see Kirk getting these, just little chances to run option routes against linebackers from the slot. And yeah, he's way too quick for them. He torches them. But then a couple plays later, you actually see him racking up air yards, getting chances to win downfield. So a contract that everyone laughed at when it happened. And seemingly the entire NFL did as well with the way, the other wide receivers just weren't quite able to get that equivalent money based on the player. But at this point, man, Christian Kirk is someone where I feel like we're on the Amon-Ra trajectory. Like, okay, we've seen it now back-to-back weeks. I'm not putting him top 12 yet, but Christian Kirk will be in my top 24 wide receivers this week. You could have argued he should have been in there last week. Definitely someone in full PPR that I don't want to call it a must start. I've seen some of you guys out there with your 14 leagues and, 5 top 12 wide receivers, but Christian Kirk is getting to the point where he is awfully close to a weekly must start.
Yeah, absolutely. Kirk looks great. Like you mentioned all the stuff that I would have hit on, honestly, for him, but I think he's definitely in the top 24 moving forward. One other name I'll mention, on the receiving side is Evan Ingram. Quick hat tip to him, 85% route participation. Last week he was at 80%, so that's 2 weeks in a row. I know we still are kind of, we don't have a ton of data, but everything we have for Evan Ingram looks really good. I know he's a guy, Ian, that you talked about a lot this offseason of why are we just not paying any attention to him. 27% target share today, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 46 yards for Evan Ingram. So he's definitely in play as a guy we should be thinking about as a high-end tight end 2 moving forward. And he might change our minds to where we move him into that low-end tight end 1, even though they're really the same thing. It just depends on who catches a touchdown, but who knows? You may look up and we might be ranking Evan Ingram as like our tight end 11, tight end 12 moving forward. He has looked really good from a utilization perspective for 2 weeks in a row and got it done on the targets today.
Fun note on the side, the Jaguars designed a couple plays per game for Jamal Agnew, who made some good use out of his opportunities last year. Most notably overtook Laviska Shenault in the offense when Urban was still doing Urban things. But man, Trevor threw a beautiful 30-40 yard pass to him that just went right between his hands. So could have been an even bigger game for Trevor Lawrence, potentially getting that 3rd touchdown. But again, back-to-back week where Trevor Lawrence is throwing touchdowns. He's clearing 200 yards with ease. Like, these were not things we could take for granted last year. Very good for the entire offense, and particularly Christian Kirk. And to Dwayne's point, maybe Evan Ingram moving forward. Dwayne, do we care that much about Zay Jones? I got a lot of people asking me about him last week. Like, I get it. He's a full-time receiver in this offense, and week 1, he had a bunch of targets to his name, but I'm still awfully hesitant about anyone other than Christian Kirk being a consistent big-time player in this offense. Zay Jones, someone that you need to flex a time or two, okay, but I'd be shocked if we're at any point this year ranking Zay inside the top 36 even.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. He's a guy that if you're playing in a deeper format, yeah, absolutely. Say you got to start multiple flex players. I know there's a league or 2 that we're in together, Ian, where you look at Zay Jones, you'd be like, damn, Zay Jones is a badass.
Be great to have, yeah.
But in your typical leagues, yeah, you're just not. It's not really a guy to even, and not really. He's not a guy I would be worrying about. So the big question here, Ian, is, man, what are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing about Travis Etienne? 37% of the snaps. 45% route participation. Not bad. Again, though, another week, he didn't even get to 30% of the rushing attempts again, 66% to James Robinson. Now, he did get the passing down work, 71% of the long down and distance. They did not need the 2-minute offense today because they were kicking ass all day. But man, like now it's kind of like I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, we really need these game scripts to be like what we thought they were going to be, which is the Jaguars trailing. The Jaguars are being far more competitive than we thought they were going to be, either staying close in games, right? Or this week they were staying ahead, pretty much the whole time. And that's problematic for Travis Etienne because it's pretty clear to me, James Robinson, if they're leading, he's going to be the dude out there. Also, 83% of the short down and distance work for Robinson. And man, Ian, he looks good. Like, I know we were kind of like, late Achilles, and I think the process was still right. I know my wife's leaving me, your fiance's leaving you because the process, we say the process was right.
The process was right.
Yeah, but I mean, 22 carries, 64 yards, and a rushing touchdown. Man, it's like, wow. I don't know. I don't know what Travis Etienne's definitely not in the RB2 conversation. Like, he's down in the RB3s now.
Oh yeah, I think I had him RB 33 last week or so. I will
say
somewhere
around there too.
Last week it was 50-50. I mean, this is worst case game script, but to your point, if they're going to keep having more positive game script than we anticipated, because that was part of the equation. We were hoping for basically what happened to DeAndre Swift last season. That's the name we kept bringing up, but the Jaguars are going to be more competitive. Clearly, that's going to hurt Etienne's chances of breaking out. I will say, though, similar to the Cam Akers discussion, we'll get to him in a bit. It sucks that you drafted Etienne round 3 or round 4, and he's someone that you really can't like cement as a starter now each and every week, depending on your league and lineup and all that. Don't go crazy. This is still a 2 running back backfield and a full PPR. Etienne should have bigger and better days, but Robinson does look good. I would love to sit here and be the guy that's like, oh, Robinson, he's just, got lucky these 2 weeks. Etienne's going to be fine because Dwain and I said he was going to be fine 2 months ago. No, James Robinson looks very good out there. And I'm not even going to do that bullshit, take away his 35-yard touchdown. He only had X amount of yards on Y amount of carries. He has 64 rushing yards in week 2. James Robinson, 65 of them after contact. So no, this is not this offensive line that's just, pile driving everyone to oblivion. James Robinson just running through massive creases. James Robinson looks back, man. And he's the only Achilles running back that looks back, but he's back seemingly, and we need to adjust accordingly. So we know that with Etienne, Dwain, how high are you willing to go up there on James Robinson though? Because his upside is also capped a bit with the potential for negative game script and Etienne stealing the targets, obviously.
They're both RB3s to me, and they're game script dependent RB3s, right? James Robinson in a game where the Jaguars are leading, he can come into the RB2 conversation. If we get into a game where the Jaguars are trailing the whole time, I think it's to be Travis Etienne entering the RB2 conversation. The challenge is figuring out which game script is it going to be, because the Jaguars do look quite a bit better. I don't know if they're really this much better than they were last year. But, we get turnaround stories, Trevor Lawrence is a guy we talked about being able to potentially take a big step forward. The rookie season wasn't good, but like you mentioned, a guy that, was very heralded, like coming into the league. So I think it's just going to depend on the game script, and it's probably going to be maddening no matter which back you're rostering when you're trying to get them into the lineup. You're probably going to get the wrong game script is going to be the challenge. And to your point, like the way why it worked so well last year for the Lions is every game they were trailing the whole time, and so it just made it easy for DeAndre Swift, managers.
Game of the week: the Dolphins took down the Ravens 42-38. Tua season going absolutely nuts. What does apparently, Dwain, I would have thought that 469 yards and 6 touchdowns was enough for people to be like, okay, I guess this Tua guy is pretty good here. No, people are still trying to come out and be like, oh, the underthrows to Tyreek deep. Okay, the first one, maybe a little bit, but Tyreek's so fast, it doesn't matter. So that's kind of a moot point anyway. What more do you want on that second touchdown? Like, if that's not in stride, like what exactly is a deep, what do we need here? Like, can we just need Tyreek to be like, we need the GPS like tracking stuff, like to just show us that he didn't slow down even like 0.01 miles per hour for this at this point. Like the throw to Mike Gesicki in the back of the end zone was absolute nails. Like it was an incredible game from Tua, and the whole arm strength thing from the beginning. Like how many times it's awesome when Herbert and these guys are able to off balance, throw a laser 40 yards across the field. But yeah, there's like 5 guys in the league that can probably do that. I don't think that's necessarily going to be holding Tua back, and it obviously didn't today. Now, incredibly banged up Ravens defense, and those touchdowns that he did throw deep to Tyreek, like I have no idea how he was able to get that cleanly behind the secondary. The second one in particular just seemed to be an egregious blown coverage. First one was, I think, Marcus Peters, just doing Marcus Peters things, but that's kind of the experience the Ravens have chosen to live with. But at the end of the day, man, Tyreek, 11 catches, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns. Haven't even mentioned Jalen Waddle looking unstoppable in the short intermediate areas of the field, 11 catches, 171 yards, and a pair of touchdowns himself. The first pair of teammates in NFL history with 10 plus catches, 150 plus receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns in the same game. Now, this was a game where the Dolphins, they got up. I mean, they were down. I mean, this was 28-7, by halftime. So obviously they had to keep their foot on the gas throwing, but we'll get to the backfield in a second. If there was going to be a team that's not exactly going to, decide to run the ball a bunch more, even in a more positive game script for them, I do think it would be one really leaning on Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert in the backfield. So, Dwain, I think you've been saying throughout the offseason, good call by you, my friend, it's going to be 50% targets for Tyreek and Waddle, might go up and down any given week, but these guys should get theirs. I doubted the ability for Tua to get these 2 top 12, even 2 top 24 wide receivers. But damn it, Dwain, they're here. It's great. It's fun. They're fast. And Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, I'm not sure if it's these guys are that damn good or they're all just really good. But either way, man, what a performance from this Dolphins passing game. Perfect
scheme fit, man. So much efficiency. 65% of the targets today split between these two dudes. 39% to Jalen Waddle, 27% to Tyreek Hill. Yeah, you're fine. I go back, and it's just like kind of a soapbox for a second, right? But sometimes we just get so caught up in these things of, oh, what do we think Mike McDaniels is going to do? Oh, they're going to be run heavy. They're not. They're this. Like when you have a player that was as good as Jalen Waddle was as a rookie, we just should have never backed off, Ian. Like we had him sitting there even as it was falling. Like we made an adjustment when Tyreek Hill. So Jalen Waddle was really a mid-second round fantasy, asset for redraft this year before Tyreek Hill signed. Tyreek Hill comes over, or Tyreek Hill gets traded there. And then all of a sudden we got Jalen Waddle falling into the 4th and 5th rounds of drafts. It was just too much of an overreaction. Like as much as we love to like try to project all these things and think we know how an offense is going to work. I remember as it was happening being like, Jalen Waddle's sliding too far. Like his talent profile is too good for this. So we have to remember this next year. I know we're always trying to figure out what are the lessons that we learn from. I don't care what ADP does. If there's a player that's a rookie this year, say it's Garrett Wilson that does this, and then all of a sudden they get a new coach or whatever. I don't care. I don't care. Like if they are a complete badass as a rookie, I'm going to be in on them the next year, right? I'm not going to let people push him down the board. I'm just going to make sure if that happens, I'm just going to draft him in every damn draft. Like that's just the way I'm going to handle a player like that. Because Waddle, it wasn't just, oh, he was kind of good as a rookie. Like everything we were looking at, we were like, yeah, the ADOT was a little low, but that's the way they used, him in the offense. We knew he had this explosive playmaking ability because we had seen it at Alabama, right? And so I think we kind of got pushed around a little bit on ADP with Jalen Waddle, and kind of, over time, it just slowly happens, right? You start forgetting. You're like, oh, yeah, well, there's Jalen Waddle. I'm not going to take him at the end of the 4th round. Like that was my bad.
Again, I'm guessing, Dwain, you had him as a top 20, worst case, top 24 receiver. So this wasn't like a full fade on Jalen Waddle, but obviously we wish we could have had a little more exposure to him. I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it was just it's a little bit too much of an overreaction just for how good he was as a rookie. You just don't see rookies do what Jalen Waddle did, and when you do see it, it usually means they're just really one of the best receivers in the league, and I think that's just what we're seeing play out.
Now, the running back situation. Chase Edmonds, borderline erotic utilization in week 1, someone that we were saying just had the utilization that we were looking for Austin Eckler. It's a fact. You go back and look at just what he did against the Patriots. No, the yards weren't there. And that is something that, maybe we need to put a little bit more behind when someone is. And I think I saw Josh Norris point this out per next gen stats. I want to say Edmonds was the least efficient rusher in week 1 in terms of rushing yards above expectation. Maybe could have put a little more stock behind that, trying to, be perfect in the process. Regardless, Raheem Mostert, 57% snaps this week. Edmonds had just 49%. Mostert, 14 combined rush attempts and targets. Edmonds had just 7. So we saw the explosiveness, man. Like Edmonds had a 28-yard run at the end of the game to basically help them end up getting that victory. But yes, at this point, it's going to be tough to play either of these guys for the time being because it seems like it's going to be going back and forth during any given week. So God forbid something happens to Mostert, I'm happy to get Edmonds back up into that RB2 tier. I still believe he's an explosive pass catching running back, but time being, man, going to have to nuke him, back into really the deep, low end RB3 range. I'm going to be answering the majority of start sit questions involving Chase Edmonds with the other guy after, unfortunately, answering a lot of them this week with Chase Edmonds. So apologies, everyone. As Dwain said at the start of the show, this is week 2. We now know absolutely nothing. We thought we knew something before. Now we know nothing, but we're getting back on the horse train. We're trying to learn more again. So riding with the punches here. Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, and this one, we just can't beat ourselves up too much, right? Like this one, I don't mind. Like
Dwain, I'm gonna have a black eye by the time we get back on this pod tomorrow, just from beating the shit out of myself. That's what's happening.
the Waddle one, like, bothers me the way we ended up where we ended up, right, in our process. The Edmonds thing, not so much. Like they went after him really hard early on in the free agency process. They signed him. Like he actually has a good efficiency profile historically. So I wasn't going to overreact either to week 1. Efficiency stats are really wild from week to week. Your utilization stats are actually much more stable. Now, it doesn't mean they're perfect. Like as we saw, like some of these situations changed. But I think what's happening, what we probably, if we underestimated anything, and again, like this is still tricky, is just the whole hot hand approach of like this style of coach, right? This coach that comes from that really Shanahan background. We've seen them do this. At the end of the day, they still ended up at almost a split. But I think what we're seeing now, Raheem Mostert, 61% of the rushing attempts, 28% to Chase Edmonds. But Chase Edmonds was really the primary passing down back, 75% of the long down and distance, 100% of the 2-minute offense. So again, seeing guys maybe settling into these roles, it's almost like Chase Edmonds and Travis Etienne, right, are really similar. And Raheem Mostert is really more along the James Robinson path. Again, a third data point will be really nice on this. This is one where I'm more sure of the Jaguars and what they're trying to do. We've seen it 2 weeks in a row. This one, I'm not so sure. It's not just the hot hand. It's just like, okay, this is the way we're going this week. And it could just really be maddening, to your point. So I do think they're both RB3s. Edmonds does get the outs due to the passing down work, so I still would prefer him in a PPR. But if you're playing in a standard at this point, I would prefer Mostert.
Yeah, and I mean, this should have been a game that was perfect for Edmonds. I mean, I remember hyping him up as a DFS play, pointing out the fact that Dolphins were 4-point underdogs. Like this should have been this is perfect game script. It just didn't work out because, Tua's throwing the ball to Tyreek and Waddle, and I can't really blame him for doing so given the success that they had going on.
There were a couple passes that he missed Edmonds on. One where he had pressure straight in his face that there was a kind of, Edmonds was just wide open, not quite in the flat, but like just to the left of the left tackle. Like he had a ton of room. That was probably going to be a 20, 30-yard gainer. So, there were some little things, that just didn't quite go right, for Edmonds. But at the end of the day, to your point, like, that counted as a target, and he only ended up with 2 targets on the game. He had 1 reception for 8 yards, so it's not like the target share was really there.
Some injuries real quick. Tyreek briefly left the game with cramps, came back in, scored a bunch of touchdowns. Cedric Wilson did suffer a rib injury. Hunter Long, the Dolphins, one of their inline tight ends, was out this week with an ankle. Long was out with the ankle. Adam Shaheen got put in IR a bit ago, and Gesicki is still having trouble getting out there full time. What were Gesicki's route rates though, Dwain? Because
4%.
64?
4%, yeah, and then only a 8% target share. He's still dead.
Yeah,
dude, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waller are so good. That's all this comes down to. Like they're so good and they're perfect for the scheme. All the play action stuff that we've seen from the 49ers over the years with Deebo and all these different guys, they have 2 of them. They have 2 of these guys, and they're using them interchangeably. It's not like one's going deep and the other's not. The ADOT for Waddle today, 10.2, Tyreek Hill, 10.7. Last week, we saw the same thing. Their ADOTs were the same. Like they're both doing all of it, and the defenses don't know what to do. They can't stop both of them. And dude, you cannot going man-to-man coverage on these dudes. Like, no, it's a sin. You can't do it. Like you cannot run with them on these drags and crossers. And then one of them's, running a streak down the field, like a go route. It's a lot to handle, man. It's a lot.
Dude, on the first touchdown, the Waddle, they just throw a little screen to Waddle, but they put Tyreek in the backfield, and they send Tyreek to the complete other side of the field, like on a sweep look. And of course, the defense takes just one step that way because it's Tyreek freaking Hill running full speed, and then this Waddle gets a chance to walk into the end zone. So really,
those 2 at double stacks today. Oh my god.
My God. So
I wonder if that's got to be the highest score of any 3 players together from the same team in DFS history. It has to be.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, 2 through 6 touchdowns. Those 2 guys, you already talked about like what they did. Like we've never even seen it. That has to be the record for the most points from 3 teammates in DFS ever.
And shout out to Mike Gesicki on the gritty attempt after the touchdown. Dwayne, I think you could have done a better gritty than Mike out there.
Did you see that one person's tweet? It said he retweeted, Mike Gesicki doing it, and it said, "Me in my room every time after Justin Jefferson scores a touchdown."
It was just so fast.
What it looked like. It was too fast. You got to slow it down.
Oh my gosh. Every time I see my like cousins, kids and stuff, these 5 or 6 year olds, I always ask them if they can like gritty. And then they just like drop what they're doing and they bust out like the best dance ever. Little kids.
Yeah, Zoe's got it too. Zoe knows nothing about Justin Jefferson other than now that I've told her like about him. And so she's watched his videos of it, but she already knew how to do it before she saw Justin Jefferson.
God, kids are
or Jamar Chase. Those are the 2 main ones.
Now, with the Ravens, amazing performance by Lamar Jackson. Unfortunately, that's not going to get talked about as much as it should here, but had to overcome some adversity on offense. No J.K. Dobbins again out with a knee injury after a full week of practices too. Like this is, even when Dobbins is back, we're not going to be able to trust him for at least a week or 2 until we see his usage back into, just a good spot, because for him to practice in full all week, still be listed as questionable and then not come in. And now Dobbins comes out before the game and he's telling like, I don't think you guys realize how severe the injury was. And it's like, no, bro, we kind of did, but you're the one that said you're going to be playing week 1, no matter what. And maybe got our hopes up a little bit, but just get better, JK. It's September, plenty of time to still do some better things, but the backfield off limits for the time being. Again, this was a game that the Ravens were up 28-7 at halftime. Kenyon Drake had 6 carries. Mike Davis had 5 carries. Justice Hill had 3 carries, splitting that backfield right down the middle. 33% snap rate was the highest here. Like that is just absolutely disgusting. Who was RB1? He was also QB1, Lamar Jackson, 79-yard house call. I just need a freaking 4-minute montage going back to even Louisville days of Lamar Jackson just taking those inverted veers straight through the heart of the defense, man. It was his Heisman play against Florida State. It was his MVP play against the Bengals. Like Houdini, getting that awesome call out there when he's spinning away from the guys. So just so electric out there, and just a reminder sometimes, as if we could ever forget that Lamar is usually the fastest player on any field that he steps on. But throwing the ball too, man. 21 for 29, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. Got some help from his guys. Rashad Bateman toasting Xavier Howard off the line of scrimmage before taking a slant 75 yards to the house. Also had Mark Andrews doing Mark Andrews things. He did miss Mark Andrews on a potential touchdown later in the game. Would have had to be a pretty great throw, but he did have a step on the guy. Luckily, earlier, I love when this happens. So Lamar hit Andrews. It was originally ruled a touchdown, but then he was ruled just short. What they do, they give it to a running back. Nope, play action, get the ball back to Mark Andrews, get him the touchdown that he wasn't able to get. So the only negative, and it's unfortunate they only lost this game by 4 points, bro, 18-play drive, 10 minutes and 52 seconds, 0 points. Mike Davis stuffed twice, then Lamar scores, but no, he was actually just short, and then they messed up the snap on 4th down. So that was really the only big problem with this offense. I would also note Xavier Howard did drop a pick 6 to end the 4th quarter, so that was the only other missed opportunity, but just an incredible game from Lamar Jackson on top of what he did last week, man. I mean, 6 passing touchdowns now through 8 quarters of football. He's still going to get slandered because people are just going to wake up and say mean things about Lamar Jackson, because that's just the world we live in, Dwayne. But hey, Josh Allen, he's a QB1, but if you want to rank Lamar QB2, man, you're not gonna find any haters here.
No, man, he looked great. Dual threat. I mean, it's a guy. Look, we loved Lamar Jackson. Kyler went a round and a half later, in drafts. Jalen Hurts was going around later. And so it was just a matter of, well, we want a dual threat quarterback. We will take whichever one, drafters are going to leave the longest on the board. Now, we did get some access to some Lamar, so thankfully. And round 5 was still too cheap for Lamar. I mean, and we had talked about that. So it did work out on some teams where we were still able to get him, but a lot of you folks did draft him, even in round 5, round 4, and you're super excited about it now because, to your point, like, he is one of the true elite dual threat guys. Real quick on Rashad Bateman, man, like 25% target share. The route that he ran on that, that first play, that kind of slant, like where he just got, that was on Xavier Howard, that the Dolphins run more man than anybody because they have 2, cornerbacks that can run the man, defense. So that's not just any cornerback, so Bateman's out there doing some really nice things. For whatever reason, like, they still are not letting him get out there for 90% of the routes, 74%. Like, so they're still rotating. DeMarcus Robinson's out there for 47% of the routes. Devin Duvernay is out there for 56% of the routes. Like, come on, guys, just let this guy be at 85%. Like, just come on, like, just, so I can check it off on my utilization thing and move along, because I just want to start him every freaking week. But yeah, look really good. Obviously, the seven targets, 4 receptions, 108 yards, and the touchdown, obviously the long touchdown. So it does look like it's starting to consolidate down to Andrews and Bateman, even though we're going to have to worry about Bateman not quite getting all the routes we want. Maybe it doesn't really have anything to do with them not thinking he's good enough. Maybe there's it was mostly all coming in their 22 and in their 13 personnel. So those are their real heavy packages. So it's a situation where, maybe they like Demarcus Robinson better as a run blocker, right? But you're not going to always, you may look up and you're like, oh, they're in a run defense, we're going to check to a pass. Demarcus Robinson's on the field. At the end of the day, it takes a little bit away from Bateman, but 32% targets per route run helps make up for that. Isaiah Likely, man, 63% targets for a route run today. We saw him get targeted last week. Still not out there for enough routes. 32% route participation, but he's the next guy that they're kind of getting involved. I don't think you're gonna be able to predict it. Ian, we're probably going to see a big play from either Devin Duvernay or Isaiah Likely as like kind of the third contributor to the passing game. But I think it's really consolidating nicely around Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman. So I'm just not going to sweat the route participation too much on Bateman just because of how good he looked today.
And the Ravens are a team that get a little wonky with that. Like, that was why we were off Mark Andrews for a bit starting off, because he wouldn't have that kind of every down role, but they would get him on the field when they wanted to throw him the ball. So
very good point.
Would note that James Proche missed this one, and Devin Duvernay suffered a concussion later. Shout out for him, returned the opening kickoff to the house. He's been having 3 touchdowns first 2 weeks, doing some great things. Had a couple round 18 darts on him earlier in the offseason, so that's good to see over there in best ball land. But yeah, Bateman, max speed, 21.48 miles per hour on that touchdown, second fastest time by any player this season per Next Gen Stats. Before we move on to the afternoon games, I want to give a quick shout out to some sponsors. The NFL action is in full swing here at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100%. With payouts bigger than ever, why bet on football anywhere else? And to make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped up same game parlays once per game day all season long. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF and get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code PFF only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Note that minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply, and see show notes for details. New sponsor here, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play and pick 'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning $250K plus in cash. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot to win big money every day. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA. Love it, guys, and NASCAR. Sign up now with promo code FANTASYPFF at nohouseadvantage.com or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out the No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. Rams-Falcons. Rams 31, Falcons 27. Another game that was getting feisty there down the end after it looked like the Rams were just going to run away with things early. But this is the one that hurts Dwain. We had a couple people not quite have the utilization that we were expecting them to have. We're going to get to Houston here in a bit. But Darrell Henderson, week 1. Only Saquon Barkley played more snaps. No running back had a higher route participation rate than Darrell Henderson. The only reason why Darrell Henderson wasn't a top 12 back last week was because we knew it was only one data point. And it's a good thing we listened to that, Dwain, because lo and behold, Cam Akers, 15 carries, 3 targets. Henderson had just 10 carries, no targets. Henderson did actually have the overall snap lead, 56% to 44%, but this is a mess. And if anything, man, I think Sean McVay in the long run would probably prefer Cam Akers to be that guy. That's more just what we've seen from this. Maybe it is still going to go back to Henderson. Henderson was better than Akers out there just in terms of, yards per carry and just, I think, the eye test as well. But if it's not going to be Henderson full-time after week 1, man, I don't know why he's going back to Akers like this unless he wants Akers to be this involved, if not more involved throughout the season.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. Like maybe, like there's
Yeah.
just so many layers. There's just so many layers to this, and we talked about this briefly last week. The fact that Cam Akers was really coming into that game. Also, he had been banged up, right? I mean, we hadn't seen Cam Akers all preseason, so that could have been a factor. He was coming back. It may have been a conditioning thing. You heard, McVay talking about how he needed to have more urgency, all these sort of things. So looking at it today, like the utilization basically says 60% of the attempts to Cam Akers, 40% to Darrell Henderson, but Henderson taking all of the 2-minute offense 100%, as well as all of the long down and distance work. So another backfield where I think we could end up seeing, and again, just one data point, but it wouldn't surprise me. We've seen this backfield actually kind of look like that before. We've not really had these two backs together, to be honest, that often over the last 2 years. So it's hard to really say exactly what it's going to look like. But based on this data point, like it might really be Henderson more as the passing down back, getting 30-40% of the rushing attempts. Cam Akers really going to be the lead back as far as, taking the rushing attempts. Both could end up having value because the Rams offense still has a chance to be really good, right? And they have a chance to be in a lot of different kind of shootouts, things like that. So we'll see what happens. But right now, like going into next week, like off the cuff, like I think they're both RB3s, kind of similar to some of these other guys we talked about. But if I had to pick between the two, I would still slightly lean to Henderson just because of the passing down role. And I just, in PPR. So maybe in standard, I would probably lean slightly to Cam Akers, but I wouldn't have a lot of conviction around either one. So like if I was, Girl Scout saunters to the door and like, I would be like, no, go away. I'm not choosing between either of these because I don't want my life to end because I don't have enough confidence.
But she insists, and then you have to say Darrell Henderson.
Yeah.
There. Also, sorry, Graham, mentioning it's getting scary. He's got to take his cat to the basement because my lights started flickering in and out. Just some good old Cincinnati apartment electric wiring we got going on here. But guys, the lights go out sometimes when we're discussing certain fantasy players. So clearly, the fantasy football gods maybe are trying to tell us something here. Could be a pain all season long, just like these lights sometimes. But that's okay. Elsewhere on the Rams offense, Cooper Kupp. Dude, he didn't even have a catch until like 2 minutes left in the first half. Finishes up 11 catches, 108 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Last year, for the season, 145 catches, 1,947 yards, 16 touchdowns. His pace after 2 games for this year, 204 catches, 2,006 yards, 26 touchdowns. It's just amazing, man. Like, I know a lot of us got out there. Dwain, I think you were one of them. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1. Look at this last week. Bro, it's still 1A, 1B at a minimum. Justin Jefferson could absolutely outscore Cooper Kupp this year, but man, 1A, 1B with these two. If anything, man, looking back, like these could have just had these wide receivers.
Not even 1A, 1B. It's just 1A, 1A.
Yeah, there we go.
Like they're both great, man. My main thing on Twitter is just people being like, you can't rank him as number 1. I'm like, okay, dude, like Justin Jefferson really is good. Like you can rank him as number 1. They're both awesome. Like they're both great players.
Elsewhere on the Rams, Allen Robinson looked like he was going to be in store for a big day. Caught an early touchdown. Was looking good out there. Only finished up at 5 targets, though. Caught 4 of them, 53 yards and a score. He should have had a second touchdown. Like no one heard the whistle blowing the play dead, but they basically had their independent spotter, saw A.J. Terrell kind of wobbling after a play. So pretty good reason, like health. Yeah, let's not have an actively concussed guy out there trying to still play, but certainly, not what Allen Robinson fantasy managers would like to see. Would also note that Tyler Higbee, big day, 7 catches, 71 yards. Stafford, dude, he had this sidearm throw that if like Mahomes made it, everyone would still be freaking out about it. But yeah, man, dropped a short touchdown. Weird angle, fastball. It is what it is. Still a great game from Tyler Higbee. Dwain, I know you were with me there on Higbee basically being this week's premier streamer target just because every single utilization metric we look at with this guy in terms of the routes per targets per route run, I should say, just screams tight end 1. And yes, last year we saw this a lot too, and he was just more so being a distraction for Cooper Kupp. But we're now 2 weeks in the year, and the guy's got, 19, 20 targets? So I understand that other tight ends are making a little bit more out of their targets. But Tyler Higbee, man, if he keeps getting 8 to 10 targets per week, like we're talking about like Dalton Schultz in L.A.
That's what I was about to say. He's looking like this year's Dalton Schultz. And Higbee, he's a tricky one because to your point, we saw all the utilization last year. We saw it all, and it never really equated to anything. But this year, it looks like it really is, and he does look like he's the number 2 target on the team behind Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson at this point looks like the number 3. Will I be surprised to see Higbee and Robinson like kind of flip flop back and forth? No, like I think that's very possible that they're doing that. But we've seen two performances now that we just didn't see really all of last year. 26% target share, 81% route participation. So he's up over the number that we want him to be at. You already mentioned, the targets on the season. So yeah, Tyler Higbee's looking really good. At this point, I think you got to call him at a minimum a low-end tight end one, but he's creeping his way into the mid tight end one conversation.
Last thing with Robinson, did score a touchdown on AJ Terrell, who has now allowed 3 scores this year, only allowed 3 scores all of last season combined. They've been tough plays. Michael Thomas beating him on a pair of contested targets, but it's still just wild. It's a cool stat. I'm not here to slander AJ Terrell. Still very good at football. Just an objective fact, Dwayne. That's all I'm trying to say here. With Robinson, though, is this enough for you to still kind of fire him up weekly as this borderline wide receiver too? Like Robinson versus Bateman in a neutral matchup, who do you think you're taking more weeks?
You just take Bateman now.
Yeah,
I think you just have to. Like one's shown a big game, the other really hasn't. But I think Allen Robinson, just put him in the low end wide receiver 3 conversation. Don't be surprised if he reemerges and he's part of that wide receiver 2, group moving forward. Like he's still out there plenty, 97% route participation. The problem is like Cooper Kupp, 40% target share. And then if Tyler Higbee gets 26%, there's just nothing left. Like there's 14%. That's where Allen Robinson was today. So, but I also want to give him a little bit of a, he's still integrating into the offense, that sort of thing. So, who knows, he could still end up coming through, and really kind of like showing up maybe in the second half of the season or here in the next couple of weeks. But I wouldn't overreact and move him like outside of the wide receiver 3s for now. Like if we get another week or two of this, then at that point, it's kind of like, well, I mean, there's nothing we can do. At that point, you're just gonna have to call him a wide receiver 4.
Marcus Mariota, 2 scores through the air, only got 16 rushing yards in this one. Look, they got a block punt for a touchdown. Then Cooper Kupp lost a fumble. Like this was kind of a self-induced kind of blowing the lead for the Rams. So I don't want to give the Falcons too much credit for that, but who I will give credit is Drake London. My goodness, the dude looked like a monster with the ball in his hands, jumped over another human being, which just is, again, just to have the confidence to even try to hurdle someone, and then not only the confidence, but then to actually pull it off. Just a true alpha move. But 8 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown, creating separation all over the place. Like that was one of the more stupid arguments we got to have throughout the entire offseason with Drake London. And I think if Garrett Wilson didn't just have such a big day, we'd be fawning over what London was able to do out there a lot more. But unfortunately, Dwayne, this isn't what everyone wants to talk about with the Falcons. It's the fact that while London is thriving, one Kyle Pitts, after 2 weeks, after 120 minutes of professional football this year, the 2021 NFL Draft's 4th overall pick. The Falcons picked this man 4th out of every single eligible player. They picked him 4th. He has 4 catches for 38 scoreless yards after 2 weeks of action. This just sucks, man. I know that he's pass blocking a little more than he should. 75% route rate last week. It should be at 100%. I get that. Can we just throw the dude the damn ball? Kyle Pitts should not be leaving any games with 3 targets. And yeah, he had 4. He drew a freaking 50-yard defensive pass interference down the sideline when the corner had to like grab onto his arm for dear life because it's Kyle freaking Pitts running 40 yards downfield. It's just annoying, man. And then to get the Arthur Smith quote at the end of it, a fun note from John Paulson at 4 for 4. Arthur Smith, the son, I guess, of the FedEx CEO, Frank Smith or some other thing. So Arthur Smith just clearly, someone's had the clawed and, worked for every single thing he's ever got there. So Dwayne, shut up about your fantasy football. He's just trying to win games out there, man. And winning games, which he's not doing, by the way, doesn't involve throwing the ball to Kyle Pitts. Come on, we can't. We're never sitting Kyle Pitts, but man, if you want to put like Waller and Kittle when he's back ahead of him at this point, like shit, it just sucks. It sucks. That's what it does.
I would still just say, let's just try to buy low. I mean, it's Kyle Pitts, man. Like I just don't see it being able to continue. Now I say that it was a rough last season, but again, it was still a really good rookie season for a tight end. I mean, it was still great. But the route participation was better today, 91%. So he was not staying in to pass block. He was actually getting out into a route all the time. So I still think this is going to turn around for Kyle Pitts. We're just dealing with a small sample. It's the first 2 weeks of the year. This is what happened. To your point on Drake London, love it, man. 46% target share out there, 89% of the routes. So he was a guy that got, dinged up early in the preseason in that first week, missed some time, and then was just kind of getting going last week. He was questionable all of week 1, right, heading into that game. And now he looks like he really is healthy. playing really well. So I think, man, the big takeaway from today for me, Ian, like, is just overall, like, the rookies. Just yes, like Garrett Wilson, yes, Drake London, yes, Chris Olave, yes. Like, I'm excited really about all of them. But, you know, Drake London and Garrett Wilson, what they did today, like, is really, I think, man, like, London's easily, he was right on the verge of the wide receiver threes, you know, for me this past week. You know, he's locked in to wide receiver 3 now and could easily push his way into wide receiver 2. I would rank, you know, London's going to rank ahead of Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson, we don't know for sure what's going to happen if the game script goes bad and they can't use 11 personnel, because he's having to share a lot with Corey Davis whenever that team is running, you know, just 2 wides. So from a consistency standpoint, I think Drake London's going to be the number 1 rookie for the season. Garrett Wilson, if he can take over that other outside role from Corey Davis, so even when they're in 12 and 21 and those sort of things, I think they're going to both be hand in hand. But right now, I would lean to London.
Corey Davis catches a 66-yard touchdown. Everyone's just like, whatever, man. Like,
no one even covered him on the play. He's just like back there. Yeah, it wasn't just fantasy managers. It was just the coverage. The secondary also just Corey Davis, whatever.
I made a note because you know how that goes sometimes. It was either a complete busted coverage or Davis ran a filthy like double move. So just I just want to see the all 22 before I completely throw that take out there. But
I haven't seen the all 22 on it. So
you're most likely right. I give an 80% chance that was an egregious busted coverage. If anyone had that full game on, maybe they already saw it come to fruition. But yeah, how about like next week, Drake London and Garrett compared to Allen Robinson? For me, I would start London over.
I'll go London easy. Yep.
Garrett's just going to be a little tough because like Elijah Moore is going to get his too eventually. I understand that Garrett could very well be the one, but like Elijah still does exist.
Kyle Pitts, go buy low. Elijah Moore, go buy low. Look, these people just don't all of a sudden become bad players. They're still good players. Like they showed they were really good last year. So and they're young. These are young ascending players. So like you didn't get to draft some of these guys you're hearing us talk about breaking out right now. Guess what? You can go trade for one because someone in your league is panicking right now after 2 weeks with Kyle Pitts. They're absolutely just panicking with what's going on with Elijah Moore. I got so many tweets today to me, like, when I did a couple things on Garrett Wilson. I can't tell you how many people asked me, do I drop Elijah Moore? No, you don't drop Elijah Moore. Like, and if someone does drop him in your league, you absolutely got to go find a way to pick the dude up.
Did you see when London did catch the touchdown, like it was a little 2-man game with him and Pitts, and London catches it and Pitts is like right behind him, and Pitts even put his hands up too. And it was like, no, man, that ball's not going to you. You should know that.
Nope.
By now.
London's too big for that, man.
Pitts almost had a chance. It was like a 3rd and goal, and Mariota threw this sucker like 200 miles per hour, and I seemed to kind of go through his hands up there. I definitely would have called it a drop, though. I'm just going to blame Mariota when things go wrong. just like, you know, we're not blaming Mac Jones for anything. It's all Matt Patricia's fault. Just one of those things. Real quick, in the backfield, no Damian Williams. He is on IR now with this rib injury. Falcons, like 3 Falcons coaches said it wasn't a big deal, and they put him on IR before the game. Like, just why even lie about that? Whatever. Cordero, 59% snaps, 10 carries, 1 target. Again, the target toss-up where maybe CPAT could have caught it. I would argue that Mariota didn't exactly give him the most catchable pass. Unfortunately, got tipped around and either pick sixed or pretty close to it. So only 1 target for CPAT. Still did, play the majority of the snaps, and more weeks than not, I'd expect him to extend that lead a little bit over Tyler Algier. Unfortunately, Dwayne, we got to get Avery Williams on the field for 25% of the snaps, even though he's only going to get 1 target out there. So Tyler Algier, I think he's going to be someone that a lot of people are trying to put on the waiver wire. 10 touches in his first game. Look at this. I'm not too interested, man. There's always a league for it, but yeah, no.
Early down grinder on an offense that just was getting blown out today. And to your point, basically the Rams let this game happen. Hey, Arthur Smith, you're trying to win games. The Rams tried to let you win this one, but you still couldn't pull it off. So looking at Cordarrelle Patterson, though, still out there for all the long down and distance. I mean, and what the hell, man? Like, for how much the Falcons were trailing, they just didn't use the 2-minute offense that much. But I'm just looking like, who got the 2-minute offense snaps in the running for the running backs? Because Patterson got 14%, Algier got 14. Oh my God. Avery Williams, 86% of the 2-minute offense. Arthur Smith is a moron.
They're trying to win games, Dwayne. They're trying to win games.
This is so egregious. And I mean, you liked Cordarrelle Patterson enough to pay him and bring him back. Anyway, so yeah, Patterson was, that's what got Patterson today on his route participation. He was only at 37%. Like, he's a guy we're used to seeing at 55, 60%. So 26% route participation. Sorry, 17% for Avery Williamson. So that was a 86, the 2-minute offense. You got to get Avery Williams out there. Patterson is still getting play out wide, 46% from the slot, lining up as a receiver still. So it's not all in the backfield for him. So still good days for Patterson, like coming ahead. But yeah, it's a little worrisome seeing, because Avery Williams, like, that worries me just because I don't even know who Avery Williams is, but they feel they got to have him on the field. So whatever.
I was just about to say, are we positive this isn't a bit here? Someone is PFF putting us on here behind the scenes.
Yeah, and they're like, let's see if Dwayne and Ian will just talk about Avery Williams. Maybe they'll like make up the college he went to or something.
I looked it up, Boise State, but okay, moving on. 49ers 27, Seahawks 7. This one was a beatdown. Seahawks only touchdown ended up being a field goal blocked and returned to the house. At one point, Seattle put all 4 running backs on the field, and then DJ Dallas threw an interception. And Dwayne, you had a funny tweet. Like, DJ throws the interception and is like trying to, come on, DK. Like, shut the hell up, DJ. You shouldn't even be getting any offense.
He's acting like he's a real quarterback, blaming it on him, like throwing his hands up, like, like you would see Mahomes do with Mecole Hardman. I'm just like, oh my God, dude.
In my running back column, I have a bull call of the week and a pissed off call of the week. And my pissed off call of the week was that the Seahawks were going to rotate 4 running backs and render all of them useless. Well, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened here. Did Rashad Penny lead? Nope. Did Kenneth Walker lead? Nope. Did the quarterback DJ Dallas lead? No, of course not, because that needs to be Travis Homer playing a team high 45% of the snaps. 4 targets, 2 carries. Penny had 6 carries. Walker had 4 carries. Actually, 3 targets for Walker out there. 5 whopping yards. It was a terrible effort, really, from the offense. Geno Smith, was doing Geno things. Only 6 incompletions, 197 yards. But again, just the ill-timed interception and just overall, it was just the Seahawks, man. Tyler Lockett, though, did have 107 yards on 9 catches. Metcalf only had 35 yards, but maybe the biggest sheesh of the week. Oh my God, man. Metcalf made an unreal one-handed catch downfield. Unfortunately, illegal man downfield. So when you get one hand, just like throw off the penalties. Like, come on. Awesome note from PFT commentator, the Barstool guy, where he said, if you catch the ball on pass interference, like, there should be like an and one of some sorts afforded in football. Like, give them an extra 10 yards or something. Like, I love that call there. But yes, Seattle offense really sheeshing out there. The running back group, the answer right now is no. Like, none of these guys. Penny, Walker, Dwayne, I don't hate holding on to them. And again, there are leagues where you can put them on there, but I don't even consider Penny or Walker, especially if it's not like a keeper league or a dynasty league or anything like that. Once we get into bye weeks, man, if this is what we're going to see every week, I don't think this is a situation we need to be holding these guys for, because unfortunately, I don't see a scenario where, unless these guys start getting injured, where we're going to trust them. But even if they do, like we saw in week 1, that was an ideal game for Rashad Penny, game script wise, and it didn't even work out that way. This week, it wouldn't have mattered if it was only Penny or only Walker. They were still going to work behind Travis Homer. I don't know why, but it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Penny was a sell high after last week. Like, if you knew Kenneth Walker was close to coming back, he was really Penny was just the early down, play last week, and he was going to have to share that with Walker once he came back. And then we knew we've got a passing down back, and now we have 2 passing down backs. So it's just like, oh my God, it's a problem. It's a problem. An offense is going to trail all the time. We've got concerns, about the quality of the quarterback. I know Geno's playing better than what we would expect him to. There's nothing to really like, about this. So yeah, I mean, if you've got Rashad Penny or Kenneth Walker, those are the 2 that I would definitely be keeping on my rosters. I just don't want to have them anywhere near, my starting lineup unless I have to, like, as a what the heck flex kind of play whenever we're on one of those weeks where we got 6 teams on bye. You really needed to isolate down to just one of these guys. But it's too many things, to have to try to overcome. Like this is worse than like what Ramondre Stevenson had to do.
Oh, far worse, far worse. We'll say now, in 6 extended appearances with Geno Smith under center going back to last year, DK Metcalf, 35 targets, 30 catches, 316 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett, 45 targets, 33 catches, 381 yards, no touchdowns just yet. So at a minimum, Dwayne, like, just seeing Geno these first 2 weeks, I do think that Geno can be more bad to below average than like worst quarterback in the league by far that he's kind of been. Too. So that's the good news for Metcalf and Lockett, but, it's still going to be instances like this where they're just not even able to score many offensive points. So with that said, sad Sad day here in San
man.
Francisco. Trey Lance with the ankle, done for the season. Never ever want to see that. And it doesn't quite apply in this one. It was just it was a design run up the middle, and it was like a Dak Prescott ankle injury. It's just gross. Man, talking to Kevin Cole last week, and we were just talking about how he never slides. And again, this wasn't even a play where he should slide. I don't want to try to rethink this like, oh, yeah, we should have known he was getting injured. That's ridiculous. It just sucks, man. Someone that was really going out there and playing well to start. I mean, just 30 passing yards, going out there, 13 rushing yards, limited snaps, was moving the offense up and down the field. Now we're not going to see him until next season. So Trey Lance, done for the year. It is good news for the rest of the 49ers offensive players. We've talked about this a lot with dual threat quarterbacks. Guys like Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, yeah, they can enable other good players. Obviously, Mark Andrews, we had the Mark Ingram 15 rushing touchdowns, but generally because these guys are scrambling instead of checking the ball down, and because they're now another person that can score a touchdown at the goal line where no one else is getting that touchdown, they can sometimes be a net negative for the rest of the guys in that offense, particularly if they're, taking away some of the passing efficiency at hand. So we've seen Jimmy G in this offense enough, man. He was number 2 in the NFL in yards per attempt last year. So Brandon Ayuk, Deebo, George Kittle, even the running backs, man, hate to say it, but that Trey Lance injury is objectively really good news for everyone else's fantasy stock.
Yeah, it's just going to be a situation where Trey's taking up less of the running game, and we know that Jimmy can, distribute the ball to all three guys, and they're going to have more passing plays now. So yeah, I hate to look at it that way too, and I do feel bad, for Trey Lance. But as far as moving forward in fantasy, it's an upgrade for Ayuk. It's an upgrade for Deebo Samuel, in my opinion. It's an upgrade for George Kittle as far as having any chance of supporting all three. Right? Not to say that Lance might not have been able to unlock some other capacity, especially for a guy like Ayuk, right, in the downfield passing game. But at the same time, we've seen Ayuk play okay, with other quarterbacks, including Jimmy G. So, and Ayuk was interesting today. He had a 33% target share. Deebo Samuel had a 24% target share. Those guys are pretty much out there on the field all the time. Obviously, George Kittle was out. Looking at the running back situation, Jeff Wilson was out there, handled 40% of the rushing attempts, 32% to Tyrion Davis-Price. But it was Jeff Wilson out there for more of the long down and distance stuff. But we did have Kyle Juszczyk. Remember, just like last year, man, he is out there for 50% of the passing downs. And then you have Deebo Samuel stealing, carries. So this game script worked out well, where the 49ers were leading, by a good bit, the whole game. And so that still allowed Jeff Wilson to end up with 18 rushing attempts. But in a normal game where the 49ers are not leading, he's not going to get close to that. He's going to be more like a 12, which isn't terrible. It's an RB3. So I wouldn't get too excited about Jeff Wilson and think that you should plug him into that RB2 conversation because he doesn't belong.
Did see Tyrion Davis-Price get 40% of those snaps, Jeff Wilson 50. Ultimately, Wilson with the 20 combined carries and targets. But to Dwayne's point, that was certainly more of a factor of just, being up 20-0 at halftime. It was good, though, just to see Jeff put forward a good efficiency game. His last couple chances he's had there really hasn't looked good at all out there, but clearly he is the starting RB1. As we told you on this podcast last week, just the fact that so many outlets were running with that hot hand approach, where Shanahan was specifically talking about the RB2s involved, not Jeff Wilson. Just make sure you try to read that whole quote. I know we all got places to be, people, but we can read, an extra 5 words from time to time. Shout out to Deebo, though. Electric 51-yard run. The dude, it's at this point, Dwain, the guy's so good. You just slot him in as a top 10 wide receiver and ask questions later. Put him higher, put him lower. You're starting him each and every week. 100+ yards and or a touchdown, 18 of 21 games since the beginning of last season. Rusher, receiver, doesn't matter. Deebo's going to go make plays.
How many yards would Deebo Samuel run if he was the full-time starter as the running back on this team?
Dude, because I saw someone bring up, because I've talked about over the years where a target for running backs is worth 2.7 times a carry in terms of just their expected PPR points. Now, a carry for wide receivers is historically worth more. We see that those yards per carry higher because I think a lot of times they're more trick.
A lot plays. Of that's jets and things like that, not true handoffs like what Deebo's getting.
Deebo has legit RB usage. He just makes more of it than anyone else. It's madness, man. Just his yards after contact, his missed tackles forced. My running back column, I'm doing the chart every week with Excel. I always have people "Oh, do you make that in R, bro?" No, I did it in half the time with Excel.
Did you scrape all the data?
I didn't scrape it, Dwain. I put a variable on the x-axis and on the y-axis, and I called it a day. I spent time with my family for a change. I didn't have the cool-looking helmets. I didn't have the helmets there. I had their names instead. That was the big drop-off I had. But I had to include Deebo on that just to show that he's up there with the Javontes, with the Jonathan Taylors, with all those guys in terms of yards after contact and missed tackles forced. So Deebo, man, I think if you want to say he's the best freaking player in the league with the ball in his hands, you're not wrong. I would note with the sheesh, you mentioned Juszczyk getting that touchdown. Jeff Wilson was working out wide before that, caught a curl and almost carried the guy into the end zone. Come on, man. That's the play I'm talking about. Give Jeff Wilson one chance at the goal line. If he doesn't score there, okay, get the ball in the end zone. But, Kyle's definitely not about fantasy points. That's for sure. Did note that Tyler Kroft got hurt with a knee injury. That's why Ross Dwelley was the recipient of a 38-yard touchdown. So great day to be great if you're Ross Dwelley. The Cowboys in Cowboys fashion. Of course, everyone writes them off. They get the W. 20-17 over the Bengals, covering as a 7-point home dog, under cashed at 42. Noah Brown. I forget who actually said this in the comments here earlier in the show, but someone was asking if Noah Brown is a legitimate fantasy asset now. And I'm going to say no to that because I think Michael Gallup's going to be back sooner rather than later, and that's going to kind of hurt Noah Brown's chances of being on the field. But it was a great game for him. I mean, caught all 5 of his targets for 91 yards and a score, and winning with a lot of contested catch goodness that he had to really live on back at Ohio State. And it's just wild to see Noah Brown out there, man. The Cowboys have used him as an H-back, borderline tight end ever since he's been there. Now he's out there, working outside, but doing good things. So again, don't mistake it says Noah Brown.
Yeah, he's the guy that you'd see him on the field and they would just put him in motion on a run play, and he would crack down on a defensive end or a linebacker, and he's out here having a game today.
Well, I remember Ohio State, they'd always run that jet motion. They'd have guys like Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell, and you'd be like, okay, maybe they're going to get this shit and turn it up for 80. And then you see Noah Brown out there and you're like, all right, I'm pretty sure they're handing it to Zeke this play. Come on now. Don't be kidding us there with that. But great game from Noah Brown. Also got CeeDee Lamb, cashing in there. Nice little end of the game there. Caught 7 of 11 targets for 75 yards. As I was saying, last week, CeeDee Lamb, it sucks. No, we can't rank him as a top 6, top 8 receiver, top 12 even, while Dak's out of the picture. But look, other guys like Brandon Cooks, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, amongst others, do they exactly put in, just the biggest, most consistent performance out there? No, and that's going to be the case with CeeDee as well. But anytime you have a receiver getting the sort of target volume that CeeDee is, you got to be complete shit at football to not make at least some sort of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, worst case value out of it. Clearly, we know CeeDee is not shit at football. So where do you kind of rank? Where did you have CeeDee, I guess, ranked this week, Dwayne? I think I had him 15. Some of the other PFF crew had him closer to 20. I can see that. Again, it's unfortunate that we drafted him to be this upside wide receiver 1, and now we got to treat him more as this mid to low end wide receiver 2. That's still someone that should be in the heavy majority of starting lineups, though.
Yeah, I had him as a low end wide receiver 2 this week. But I mean, I saw enough, from Cooper Rush to feel fine about keeping him there. And I think he could, to your point, on 11 targets, he could still come through and give you a big wide receiver 1 week. 37% target share today. So I think it's fine. To your point, we drafted him to have that top 6 upside that you're not going to get for right now, but it's only for right now, right? I mean, we may not be with Dak quite as long as what we thought originally, so we'll have to wait and see. And Lamb could be the kind of guy that, right, is really coming on right as you're heading into your fantasy playoffs once Dak is fully ready.
Cooper Rush now in his 2 starts has been passable. He's been a backup quarterback, someone that's not going to completely kill the entire offense. I know, not the strongest.
He gave Lamb 17 points in the game last year against
that
the
Vikings game, and Cooper went off too.
Yeah, so I mean, now we got him around 15, in a PPR this week. So I think that hey, that keeps CeeDee Lamb usable.
I would say, just like at the end of the Buccaneers game, CeeDee got loose at the end and Cooper just overthrew him. Could have been a monster gain. Yeah. That did happen earlier in this one. CeeDee really had Chidobe Awuzie in a pretzel, beat him deep. But yeah, Cooper overthrew that one. So I know we're going to get those happening, but don't be too afraid to go back to the well with CeeDee. We need to find out more about Dalton Schultz's knee injury. The official word was that he's undergoing an MRI, and there's no concern about the ACL structure. So that's good. Get better, Dalton Schultz. Want to see all these players out there healthy. The backfield usage, Ezekiel Elliott, 66% snaps, 15 carries, 2 targets. Tony Pollard, 41% snaps, 9 carries, and a sweet 7 targets. So one of those, I thought it was a rush attempt live. I guess it must have just been, a 6-inch flip or something like that. But 46 yards around left end, looking as explosive as all hell. got down the 1 inch line. And what the Cowboys do, Dwayne, they gave him the ball the next play, let Tony Pollard go get.
It was a great weekend for that. We got Mark Andrews got to get his, Tony Pollard got to get his. Yeah.
I think there might have even been another one out there, but either way, great weekend for that. With that said, this is still a Cowboys offense. They scored 20 points here, and that it felt like it took kind of a lot for them to get there. Zeke, Pollard. Zeke to me feels like a volume-based low-end RB2 only because I can't fathom saying the word Zeke RB3. Tony
You're
Pollard.
Gonna need to.
Oh, we're there.
Yeah, man. It is what it is at this point. I mean, like 15 carries for 53 yards. He's the same thing as James Robinson. Are you calling James Robinson on RB2?
No, Dwayne, I'm not.
Now, look, when you get Dak back, if the offense gets going, then I think that changes the conversation. I think potentially. But right now, with the offense, like you just said, like it looked like it was a struggle for 20 points. So I think you got to put him in the RB3 territory. And I think Pollard's in the same range. Pollard targets per route run today for Pollard 54%. So basically every time you ran a route, you better turn around, man. It's coming hot. Like Cooper Rush is coming to your ass. So 23% target share on the day. But Zeke's still out there, man. Zeke was out there for 60% of the 2-minute offense. So was Pollard, 60%. So Pollard was out there. 38% of his routes did come in the slot today, Ian. So little shout out slot action for Tony Pollard. I know that you were pro Tony Pollard slot this preseason, so he did get some of that today. I don't know how many of his targets came from that, but Zeke's still just active enough, right? And it's like, come on, just let Zeke be the early down back and just make Tony Pollard, the full-time passing down back, and then everybody's happy. But it's still kind of a split, between the two guys. But it's more of a 60-40 though at this point. So I think Pollard's he's out there enough, and we know he can give the big plays like what we saw today. That keeps him in the RB3 conversation. Last week his utilization wasn't quite as strong.
It should be 70-70, and Dennis freaking Houston doesn't need to be running wind sprints for half the game, man. That's my opinion on the matter.
Fair enough.
But yes, to your point, without Dak, probably is time to put Zeke in that RB3 territory. So yeah, again, not someone you need to necessarily bench, but far
do
from
like you do, Ian. You like to motivate guys. Put him down there. And let's see if Zeke can come out and score 2 touchdowns and work his way back into the lineup.
If you're going to start Zeke anyway, leave him on the bench until Friday or Saturday. Just make him sweat a little bit, and then slide him back into that starting lineup afterwards. So thought I had something else to say on the Cowboys, but couldn't have been that important. So now over to the Bengals. Joe Burrow, since entering the NFL, sacked at league high 96 times. Not great. Took 6 more in this game. Michael Parsons just looked unblockable out there. Lel Collins, coming from the Cowboys, told Burrow, you got your new personal bodyguard. Could not even come close to slowing down Parsons this one. Dwayne texted me during the game, just Parsons best defensive player in the NFL. And I'm not going to disagree, man. I would love to see, take my money, NFL pay-per-view, clone Derwin James 22 times and clone Parsons 22 times. Let's see those guys go at it for 60 minutes, man, because just the things remember when he beat Tyreek Hill in a race this offseason? I'm sure Tyreek wasn't taking it as seriously as Parsons, but how many guys can beat Tyreek Hill in a race that Tyreek isn't taken seriously, man? Like, this dude is a freak among freaks, and he's the only reason the Cowboys won this game, in my opinion. But focusing on the Bengals offense, just another game, man, where the Bengals couldn't block anybody, and accordingly, like you saw Burrow out there, it was a 3rd and 12 or something where he just got the ball out of his hands in about half a second to T. Higgins. Like, they just haven't even been able to think about looking deep for Jamar Chase. And I think that is why we end up seeing T. Higgins take the lead in this game, more so in the short intermediate areas of the field. So we're not worried about Jamar Chase. We're not worried about T. Higgins either. But are you worried, Dwayne, about the overall upside of this Bengals offense? Now 0-2, despite having faced Mitchell Trubisky and Cooper Rush through 2 weeks.
No, I think they'll get it smoothed out, right? I mean, Joe Burrow's just too good of a player. These receivers are too good. They made the upgrades to the offensive line. That's what's weird, is like just how much pressure Joe Burrow still is under. Now, look, you faced off against TJ Watt and then Michael Parsons, so 2 of the best, perimeter, rushers in the game. So that was problematic. And La'el Collins, well, I wouldn't be advertising yourself as like a personal bodyguard, because it's not like you're not one, at least not yet. And Collins, man, when he was with the Cowboys early on, he was really good, but he was always really more known as a mauler on the ground, right?
He'd get that highlight where he's pulling and the poor cornerback steps up and he gets
Well, and he would do it against defensive linemen, just blow them up, like, when early on in his career. But pass protection, like, has always been a little bit more of a problem, like not consistent anyway. So I think that's been a challenge for Burrow. But it was a positive game for T. Higgins, man. Like, I mean, and look, we've talked about this how many times, where we've even just asked, like, hey, would we be surprised if you look up at the end of the year and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have the same number of targets? Like, it really could happen. You saw it today, 27% target share for both guys. 100% route participation for Jamar Chase, 98% for T. Higgins. After, suffering the concussion in week 1, he made it back, was out there all the time. Your boy, dude, Hayden Hurst, 85% route participation. Look at that.
Sample got hurt, which I think helped a little bit, but yeah.
Oh, did it? Now. Okay. But he was over 80 last week. So that's 2 weeks in a row for Hayden Hurst. Like, obviously he's not going to be one of the major targets in the passing game, but still, like, being out there enough. And if the Bengals can just kind of get the offense like right enough, like, he could still have those Uzoma type spike games, but we're seeing more utilization from Hurst than we ever saw really from Uzoma last year. So I think there's a chance that he could come through, especially in like DFS.
Joe Mixon, 19 carries, just 57 yards, did also catch 3 passes for 26 yards. So these games happen. Obviously, Joe Mixon should still be cemented in every single starting lineup out there. Tyler Boyd, obviously odd man out when both these guys are healthy. One injury away to either, which we almost had with T. Higgins, though, from being a weekly factor. So Tyler Boyd, someone that you don't need to, keep at all costs, but just remember he is one of those wide receiver 3s that does actually have a path to more upside if either starter gets hurt in front of them. But yes, last thing with Joe Burrow. Since entering the league, man, I mentioned the NFL high 96 times he got sacked, but 8.3% sack rate, minimum 500 dropbacks, league high. If you go on to 100 dropbacks, only Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Geno Smith have been worse, man. It's just a terrible group, and we have to indictment. And I do think the offensive line in Cincinnati probably has more to do with that than normal. I mean, we watched that game. It wasn't like Burrow was, sitting there holding on to the ball too long that often. But that's the one issue, man. Because if they can fix that, I don't know who the hell is going to be stopping this Bengals offensive line anytime. And as some of the people in the comments are talking about, Trayvon Diggs did step up there. I mean, him and really the Cowboys' entire secondary. One of those things where we went back and I was tweeting it, the last time Jamar Chase and Trayvon Diggs went matched up, LSU, Bama, and, Chase was just really beating them like a drum throughout most of that one. Diggs won this one, man. And as much as, we love to bring up Diggs, allowing the most receiving yards in the league and all that, it's one of those things where we can't mention that without mentioning just how great he is at forcing the turnovers. And that's why I think when you look at just the EPA gain from that, you can start to wrap your mind around it. So every year, Dwain, I do my little Jameis Winston All-Stars team, not to disparage anyone, but just to show players that have, real volatile ways of playing the game. And that's Trayvon Diggs. And it's a lot of fun to watch for better and for worse. And today was certainly one of those better times. Next game, not exactly a classic, but, a game nonetheless that we're going to talk about. Denver Broncos beat the Houston Texans 16-9. Pretty hilarious. Denver could not get a freaking they kept getting false starts. This happened last week and it happened again. So the Denver crowd literally started counting down the play clock to try to remind the team when they were getting down to 0. Absolute madness going on in Denver. They were getting restless, and as they should, man. I mean, some of the Russell Wilson, just what you'd hear during the game, like, oh, he's 4 for 15 now. Courtland Sutton's the only wide receiver doing anything. It was a rough one. He finished 14 for 31, 219 yards, but it really could have been a lot easier victory for Denver, I think. I mean, Courtland Sutton, earlier in the game, he draws a DPI inside the 5-yard line, and Denver tried to do the cool thing, man. They went back to him 2 plays in a row, trying to throw him fades. The first one, it did look like he scored, but his foot was out of bounds, and the second one just wasn't able to get there. And then Russ waits. He has Javonte Williams wide open in the end zone, tries to zip it in, gets batted. Somehow Kendall Hinton almost caught it, but just a whole 4 straight sheeshes on that drive. Later in the game, once again, Montrell Washington was close to coming down with a 20-yard touchdown. Couldn't stay in bounds, though. So, look, it's tough to look at our performance when a quarterback goes 14 for 31 and say, anything good about it. But I do think his PFF grade is going to be a lot better than his QB rating is going to be, just based on kind of what we saw. If you look at some of the big time throws out there, he was making them. And Courtland Sutton now, man, through 2 weeks, I think we can all guess who the number 1 leader in air yards is Chris Olave. Number 2, though, Courtland Sutton. A big part of that this week was Jerry Jeudy getting ruled out early. They said it was a shoulder injury initially, and then we end up getting word that he had negative x-rays on his ribs. But Dwain, Holy shit, man. If we have Judy missing time, obviously Tim Patrick's out of the picture. KJ Hamler didn't play this week. They're not calling it a setback, but it seems pretty weird to me that you played the guy in the preseason. You played him in week 1 as a regular wide receiver. And it's like, yeah, he's not playing week 2.
Regular maintenance.
Not a big deal, Dwain. Nothing to see here. Like, don't worry about it. Why are you guys even asking us about this? If Courtland Sutton is going to be playing in an offense alongside Tyree Cleveland and Kendall Hinton, shout out the quarterback for 1 week, during COVID. Courtland Sutton, man, like 122 yards, 7 catches. I know we haven't gotten, the touchdowns, just a complete blow-up game yet, but Sutton without Judy, that's a top 12 wide receiver right there.
Absolutely. 11 targets, 7 receptions, 122, 41% target share today. You already mentioned the air yards, 50% for the team. Yards per route run, 3.70. Yeah, he's in the top 12 any week that we're going to be without Judy. And it's sad because Judy was actually off to a nice start, looking good. Wasn't out there long, only 14% of the snaps. He finished the game with an 11% target share on only 14% of the snaps. So, I mean, that's a 60% targets per route run. Like, I think they were about to form a really nice combo. So hopefully Judy's not hurt too bad, because I think that this offense has an opportunity to really gel. I think we're seeing the worst that we're going to see of the Broncos offense right now. I think it's only going to get better as the season goes along. So yeah, Sutton, absolutely, man. Smash top 12 right now, especially if Judy's out. And if Judy's back, like, it's just, he's in the wide receiver 2 conversation anyway, and Judy was pushing his way to be in, and he might have made it there today. We might have been really just looking at both of them as being, low end wide receiver 2, mid-range wide receiver 2 types.
Javonte Williams, 65% snaps, 15 carries, 3 targets. Melvin Gordon, 32% snaps, 10 carries, 1 target. Yes, Dwain, we'll take this. Now, we need the Russell Wilson-led Broncos to score more than 16 points per game, so hopefully some of those touches can end with Javonte in the end zone, but this is fine. This is all we needed. We just couldn't take the 50-50 bullshit we had to deal with every week last year. Great news for Javonte in a game that, again, they were actually down 9-6 going into the fourth quarter. So it seems like Javonte, they trust him more so as a pass down back, and they're certainly not shying away from him, on the early downs either. So Javonte still going to be tough to, slam him into the top 10 because Melvin is going to stay plenty involved. But after week 1, I think there could have been some concern about Javonte. Maybe those targets were fluky. Maybe he's someone that we need to start putting a lot closer to Melvin Gordon. After this one, man, I'm more convinced than ever that Javonte should be able to have that 60-40, 65-35 split, which I know a lot of people were hoping that he'd just take over the whole backfield. But I think throughout the offseason,
65-35 is still
that's
great,
all we wanted.
man.
That's all we wanted, pretty much.
Yeah, 65% is like, that's basically an every down back nearly, right? Like, look, we get certain guys, like, especially this year, we've got 3 players that were over 80% of the snaps today with CMC, Saquon Barkley, and Leonard Fournette, but we don't get those that often. Like, typically you get maybe 1 of those for the whole season, maybe 2. And then you've got a bunch of, I say a bunch, you've got another group of about like 4 to 8 backs that are in this 65% range, and you want to have those backs. And so right now, again, only 2 data points. Last week, he was, he actually outsnapped Melvin Gordon, but Melvin Gordon was out there, got much more of the rushing attempts. Gordon in week 1, had like 60% of the rushing attempts. This week, only 32%, 52% of the rushing attempts went to Javonte Williams. Long down and distance, 56% to Javonte Williams. 60% of the 2-minute offense went to Javonte Williams. So Melvin Gordon's still getting a little bit involved in those plays as well. This week was different. Like last week, it was like Javonte had a very niche role. It was like, he's going to be the receiving back, and they used him that way. This week, it was really more, hey, 2/3 of the offense, regardless of if it's long down and distance, 2-minute offense doesn't matter, is yours, Javonte. Melvin Gordon, for the drive we put you out there. If we go into those, if we use one of those sub packages or we go to hurry up, fine, we're just going to leave you out there too. It was really just more 2 out of every 3 drives to Williams, 1 out of every 3 drives to Melvin Gordon. So yeah, I'm taking this as a positive for Williams. Obviously we'll see what happens next week. But I think with some of the injuries happening, like there's no way you're keeping Javonte out of the top. I think it's gonna be tough to keep him out of the top 10 at this point, because we'll talk about James Conner in a minute, but just some of these other backs, like, we've had Kamara, we're not sure where he's going to be. So Javonte's probably a top 10 guy right now with all the injuries.
Top 10, top 15. You're starting Javonte Williams each and every week, as you should. We drafted him to be that guy. Sad day, Dwain. Alberto, he had the utilization metrics going his way. We played on several teams. Again, Higbee, I thought, was the best tight end to kind of have this week. But after Higbee, a couple other guys, but Alberto and Juwan Johnson were the 2 that were just readily available a lot. And I think you could kind of wrap your mind around them being that guy for this week. Nope. Eric Saubert catches the only catch that the Broncos tight ends had. Also it was a nice catch for a 22-yard touchdown. Alberto couldn't snag either of his. He had one early on, too, that bounced right off his hands, and he had some room to run. And as we know, with the upside Alberto does theoretically possess, could have been a big play. But how bad were his actual route running numbers, or is he actually still out there the full time?
59% route participation. So not good. Yeah. You got Eric Sauber out there 17%, Tomlinson out there 5%. So, and then, Andrew Beck technically, is they put him as a fullback. So, but I mean, there's a lot of these different guys they're using in this heavy personnel. So yeah, it's a problem.
This damn Green Bay Matt LaFleur coaching tree. Cole Kmet, Dwayne, we didn't watch the last half hour of that game, but 2 weeks in the year, still 0 catches. Just not getting much going there. On the Houston Texans side of the ball, Brandon Cooks, 10 targets, caught 4 of them, 54 yards. Coulda, shoulda, woulda had a 6-yard touchdown. Got wide open one-on-one. Just a nasty pivot route. Reminded me of Stephon Diggs putting Lattimore in a blender last year. Maybe like a middle-class version of that. I don't want to get too carried away here. But either way, Davis Mills missed him low and inside. Would have been a lot cooler if that was an accurate pass. But alas, Nico Collins, 9 targets. But we know what Brandon Cooks is at this point. He's a high volume, low-end wide receiver 2, upside wide receiver 3. You're going to live with these down weeks. The big story, Dwayne, was Lovie Smith told us in week 1 that Dameon Pierce was a starter. He did start him, but he played Rex Burkhead ahead of him every time that mattered after that, even in a game that the Texans were up by 20 points for most of. Now, Dameon Pierce in a game where it was close throughout, dominates usage here. Let's see, 63% snaps, 15 carries, 1 target. Rex Burkhead had 36% snaps, 0 carries, and 3 targets. On the one hand, it's good. Dameon Pierce is getting the early down work. He should have always been getting the early down work. On the other hand, Rex Burkhead still does seem to be annoyingly involved on passing downs. Dameon Pierce, is he a more hyped like Zeke, I guess, at this point? Like, what are we kind of making of this backfield? Because this is good, man, because we couldn't even think about playing him after what happened last week. With that said, he's not going to be in the top 24, I think, after this. He's still in a terrible offense. He's trying, but unfortunately for Dameon Pierce, this season, man, let's see. I had this handy dandy stat up. Lovely podcast. I'm going to go on here. I want to say he's got 82 rushing yards and like 75 of them will come after contact this season. So Dameon Pierce, like James Robinson, I'm not criticizing them for the lack of efficiency because I think it's more of an offensive problem, but that offensive problem is also a fantasy manager's problem. And we got to realize that a lead early down back on the Houston Texans is probably not going to be giving us that many scoring opportunities. Thoughts on Dameon Pierce's usage and what to expect from him moving forward?
Yeah, similar to James Robinson, similar to Zeke. Like, that's what we're dealing with. But, you also have a 32-year-old handling the passing down. So there's a chance something happens with Burkhead that could open up more room for Dameon Pierce. Like Zeke, he's not getting that. Like Tony Pollard, is going to keep that role unless he gets injured, right? So I think that's the challenge. James Robinson not getting that. That's what they want to exactly use Travis Etienne for. So Burkhead, I think is a little bit less of a barrier to a guy like Dameon Pierce. So I might rank Pierce ahead of those other two as far as my rest of season rankings whenever I go through the utilization stuff tomorrow. That's one that I'll have to kind of ponder like between them, but they're all pretty similar. But you mentioned it, like looking really good. Yards after contact, 3.73 today. The average, for, an NFL back is down around 1.95, like over the last 2 years. So that was really good. Explosive rush rate. So those are carries of 10 plus yards or more, 20%. So that was also good. I don't know how they're going to, I think he's definitely locked into the early down stuff. 84% of the rushing attempts today, 100% of the short down and distance. But I don't know what it's going to look like with Burkhead. Can he start to carve out more of that? Like, we know Pierce was really good as a receiver and as a pass blocker at Florida. So I do think there's a chance he could just slowly start to earn more of that as well. But I think to really fully unlock it, it might take a Rex Burkhead injury. I know we'll have to see, but it was a positive, right? We'll take it. Last week, we feel like, we were just completely hoodwinked on this whole thing with Pierce. So he at least is playable, to your point.
Hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray by everything going on there. Man, I just hope, I don't even want to say it, but I will. If Rex Burkhead gets hurt and Dario Gumbawala just takes that role, I'm not going to be happy, Dwayne, but it is a possibility.
And it could happen.
It could happen. 2 more games to get there, everyone. Appreciate it, as always, for sticking with us as we pass the 2-hour mark on this lovely Monday morning now at this point. I guess it's still Sunday night for you, Dwayne, so live a little. Cardinals Cardinals 29, Raiders 23. Kyler Murray against the world. Holy shit, man. We don't need Cliff. Just snap the ball to Kyler. Don't even tell the wide receivers what to do. He'll run around and figure it out. Like the plays he was making out there, I feel like he couldn't even pull off. In Madden, your guy would just fatigue at some point and you get caught because holy shit, man. The 2-point conversion. And now on the 4th down, Max Crosby has him dead to rights. Max freaking Crosby. Kyler weighs like 160, dripping wet. Like, my goodness, somehow gets away, gets the hold, finds a way to score the end zone. Then the next 2-point conversion, they take a meaningless false start, move back 5 yards, make their lives harder. No problem. Kyler threads a freaking needle to AJ Green, who finally manages to catch the ball after he dropped a potential touchdown to help them out a few plays before. So just an incredible comeback from Kyler after this offense looked just terrible for the first 30 minutes of the game and looked really bad last week too. I mean, let's not forget, like Kyler getting 20 fantasy points last week. We'll take it. We'll take that 8 days of the week. Certainly came mostly in garbage time, but luckily garbage time, regular time, all those points count equal in fantasy land. So Kyler, Dwain, nice QB2 throughout the offseason. If you want to put Lamar there, that's fine. QB3, QB4, Kyler Murray continuing to be treated as the upside QB1 that he's really been ever since stepping foot on an NFL field. Pass down usage, Zach Ertz, 11 targets. Marquise Brown, 11 targets. Greg Dortch only had 4. Luckily, he managed to convert them to 4 catches, 55 yards, and a score. So Marquise Brown should have had a bigger day. He had a sick one-handed catch on a 4th down to keep them in the game. Originally ruled it a touchdown, but he got ruled just short, and they gave it to Darrell Williams on the next play for the score. And then an OT, dime to Marquise Brown. I think it's a drop. It was an awesome play by the safety.
He got railed on that play, though.
Yeah, the ball hit him in the chest. He got 2 hands on it. If you want to call it a drop, that's fine. I would argue, though, just a better play by the defender. So don't be too tough on Hollywood in this one. Again, literally a half yard away from, having a touchdown next to that score. Would have had a nice amount of yards with that. So Marquise, maybe dropping him more into like the mid, because I've been trying to.
No way, man. 10 targets, like it's coming. Like this
but like
just hasn't played good,
bro. I'm still starting him. I've had him like wide receiver 10, wide receiver 12. So like maybe he's.
Oh yeah, that's where I've had him too. Like I mean, the utilization's still there. Like I'm not blaming this on Marquise Brown. Like I feel fine. Like I think he's a high end wide receiver 2 until DeAndre Hopkins comes back.
But you're still starting him everywhere. Exactly. So maybe a little overzealous wide receiver 1, but come on, still wide receiver 2, still getting out there. Was also good to see Zach Ertz getting out there, being a target hog. The calf issue looks to be completely behind him at this point. But where it gets interesting, Dwain, is the running back room. I thought I was nailing the Eno Benjamin call. I said later in the week, go get him. We saw good usage out of him last week. He was the only guy getting used behind James Conner. And I just thought it was a situation like Jeff Wilson where people weren't wising up to it yet. I thought we could get ahead on next week's waiver claim with Eno at the end of this week. As we saw, though, Darrell Williams actually ended up having just as many carries as Eno. And by the end of the game, the snap splits were in favor of Darrell. 44% to 42% for Eno Benjamin. So James Conner, it's my fault. I put him on my helicopter. He had like 50 yards at halftime, and then he hurt his ankle. Couldn't play the rest of the game. So hand up. My bad, everyone. James Conner's hurt again. Point the finger here. With that said, Dwain, looks like we're going to have a 2-back committee here instead of the one that we've been seeing mostly from Cliff Kingsbury. What are your overall thoughts on what we saw from Benjamin, from Darrell Williams, and who do you want to spend your fab on, if any?
Yeah, I mean your guess is as good as mine. I would still make it Benjamin, but it was a mess. Like Darrell Williams, 45% of the routes, Eno Benjamin 40%, and Eno was getting some run before Williams was really even out there, right? When Conner was still in the game. Rushing attempts 30% to Darrell Williams, 33% to Eno, so it's all pretty split. And then the long down and distance stuff, 92% to Darrell Williams, and actually more of the 2-minute offense also went to Darrell Williams and not Eno Benjamin, who we would have thought, well, maybe like he would make the most sense there, right? As the guy that we thought had the receiving down chops. Not so much. So I think it's just going to be a cluster. Like it's going to be a mess between these 2 guys. Maybe one of them emerges. I feel like I would still want to put my chip in on Eno Benjamin, like, cause I feel like there's this unknown potential upside. Maybe he's just a better player. Darrell Williams, I feel like I've seen enough. Like, he's an NFL player, right? But Darrell 1L Williams, like, I just don't think he's going to do enough to make me feel like, oh my God, I got to have him. Now who knows? Like I say that and then it'll come out next week and it'll be Darrell Williams like all the time for James Conner. He is the one that profiles more similarly, right, to James Conner. But I think it's going to be a split. To your point, it's just going to make it tough. So I think I would still lean Benjamin just because I also feel like Benjamin's the one that once we get James Conner back, still probably has a little bit of a role. But by then, who knows? You probably won't want Benjamin. You'll just be like, I'm going to cut him, let James Conner play.
The problem is if Connor's out next week, like it's going to be impossible to rank Eno like in the top 30. Like he's going to be a flimsy start this week. And then if Connor's just back, then he's going to be back to being nothing on the bench.
That looked like a high ankle. I'm not a doctor. I saw the play when it happened. James Conner kept playing, but when I saw it, I was like, I thought, wow, he's going to come. And he did that last year when he got hurt at the end of the year. Like he kept playing in that game. So I think the adrenaline wore off at halftime. But my guess is that's going to be, and I'm not a doctor, but my guess is from looking at enough of them, because we do this, we watch fantasy all the time and we watch what the doctors say. And they're like, looking at this mechanism of action. I'm like, yep, that's a ankle sprain. That's what it looked like.
You heard it here from Dr. McFarland as he just kept stressing to us. All right. On the Raiders side of the ball, Josh Jacobs, 75% snaps, 18 carries, just one target. This did come with Brandon Bolden out. I don't know why Brandon Bolden matters, but he does to Josh McDaniels. So unfortunately, he also matters to fantasy managers. Amir Abdullah did seem to take, the majority of the pass down work though. And again, this was a game that the Raiders were well in front of. So we have seen Jacobs flirt with this sort of usage in games where they can get ahead. Unfortunately, wasn't able to find the end zone. He did get close, I believe, once, but just wasn't meant to be. Darren Waller also almost had a touchdown late in the third. It kind of went off his hands. Wasn't the most accurate throw. Carr did find him later, though, for a score. The big, I guess, just story out of this one was only 12 receiving yards for Davante Adams, his fewest in a single game since week 7 of 2017, Dwain. So after week 1, it was just like, over under 150 yards for Davante Adams each and every week the rest of the season. Couldn't get it going in this one. For sure, going back to the well, with him as an upside wide receiver 1, top 5, top 6, whatever you want to say, option the rest of the way. But just overall thoughts kind of on this new look Josh McDaniels passing game, Dwayne, now that we have 2 weeks of data on it.
Yeah, I mean, we saw someone get a little bit more involved than what we've seen before with Mac Hollins. He had a 20% target share, so that was above Davante Adams. But you really saw Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller were the two that stepped up. And we talked about this last week. You're not going to have a game every week where Davante Adams gets a 45% target share. That's what he had in week 1. And so what happened? Hunter Renfrow goes from an 18% to a 26% target share. Darren Waller moved from an 18% to a 23% target share. Guess what? Those are 2 target shares that last year in the Raiders offense we were happy to see. And so now you're still getting that with Davante Adams in the offense. I think it's still a pretty condensed offense. I'm not betting on Mac Hollins having many days like this.
How dare you?
Very, very easily could have been 30% to Renfrow, 28% to Waller, right? And 18% Davante Adams. And really Mac Hollins was like a 5%er. So it's just, it's very condensed around these 3 players. I think all 3 of them are going to pay off their ADP at this point. Adams just kind of had, that major seesaw, right? Huge week 1 and then that big drop off. He still scored you a touchdown. So he came through a little kind of like bubble screen kind of pass, with Mac Hollins blocking for him down inside, like the 3-yard line. So still ended up with 6 targets. So it's not like the worst day ever, but I think it's going to be fine. All 3 of these guys, I think, can survive in the passing game. And you mentioned Abdullah. He was out there for all of that passing down work, 82% of the long down and distance. We did see Josh Jacobs, though, get a little bit of the 2-minute offense, 44%, and he had 83% of the team's rushes. I'll be honest, Josh Jacobs, like his utilization, like almost looks more like a Derrick Henry, right? It's so high in the rushing percentage attempt and getting a little bit of involvement on some of the passing downs, like, maybe we're going to see a little bit more because like last week he was 77% of the rushing attempts and was over 70% snap share. So they're not quite using the other 2 backs like they did in New England, where it was more of like you struggle to have one guy get to 50% of the snaps. Josh Jacobs is vastly outproducing from a utilization from a utilization standpoint. Like he actually looks quite a bit better than what I thought we would be thinking after 2 weeks.
Well, it's only 2 backs, which has been great because in week 1, it was Bolden as the pass down. Abdullah didn't really play. I think he had a couple snaps, but it wasn't anything significant. This week, Abdullah took the pass down snaps, but Zamir White only had a 5% snap rate and 1 rush attempt. So that's great. And Jacobs, if we don't have that Rex Burkhead, Ramondre Stevenson type guy just shaving off his early down stuff, yes, we can get behind Jacobs. And with this Raiders offense, I think what we've seen through the first 2 weeks, even if their offensive line maybe still has a couple holes in it, I do think that we'll be looking at an above average scoring offense more times than not, especially once they start really getting back into the thick of those AFC West shootouts that, Dwain had that lovely over under 50-point game stat that we couldn't stop hearing about throughout the whole offseason. I kept asking for it, Dwain. I'm not hating on you, man.
That's good.
Final game, which Dwain and I watched the first half of. We were going to start after Sunday Night Football. I think we saw enough when the Packers are up 24-7 on the Bears. I think we were right, Dwain. 27-10 final in favor of the Packers. They cover. I'm guessing the under hit. Justin Fields threw 11 passes in a game that the Bears lost 27-10. Only took 3 sacks. Like, he just... I don't know. I don't get that strategy, but it is what it is. Looking at the Packers offense first, though, lovely snap counts on behalf of the one, the only Nathan Yonke. You can find all this on PFF.com. In terms of the Packers running backs, Aaron Jones, 40 snaps. Aaron Dillon. AJ Dillon at 39.
We're definitely getting late, baby.
So, yeah, literally 1A, just as Matt LaFleur told us. 18 routes for Aaron Jones, 15 routes for AJ Dillon. 3 targets for each. Carries were in favor of AJ Dillon, 18-15. Now, Aaron Jones was fantastic out there, had the pair of first half touchdowns, looked explosive, certainly seemed like the superior player to AJ Dillon. But Dwain, more and more, man, like, we just got to keep creeping these guys closer, because clearly, even if Aaron Jones is a better receiver and he might get a couple more routes per game, they still view AJ Dillon as, again, someone that I think they can go one drive in, one drive out, and not really adjust the offense to. So, also having both them on the field, I want both these guys in my lineup. I just think it's unfortunate that we're probably not going to get that Alvin Kamara-esque year out of Aaron Jones that we were hoping for. Still very much a 2 running back committee.
Yeah, I mean, long down and distance, it definitely still leaned to Aaron Jones tonight. But overall, yeah, I mean, everything was just so close. I agree. I think we're have to move Aaron Jones down a little bit. AJ Dillon keeps creeping up. It's almost becoming more like Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. That's what this looks like to me now. We thought maybe we could see more of an Alvin Kamara like early in his career with, AJ Dillon playing the Mark Ingram back in those days. And really not the Mark Ingram from this year, but back when Kamara was a rookie and in his second year. This really looks much more like what we're seeing in Cleveland.
What do you think the leading Packers receiver had in targets, Dwayne? Most targets for any one Packers receiver?
15%.
You always do the percentages. 4 targets for Samuel Watkins. That was a team high. He did catch a 55-yard.
Man, I thought Cobb, I figured had to be above that. I'm pulling it up right now. I'm pulling it up on Ultimate.
Watkins had 4, and then 6 or 7 guys had 3 targets, and then Toney had 2, and something named Tyler Davis had 1. So this is, again, I was talking about it with Justin Herbert last week. Just a socialist offense here, just spreading the ball around everywhere into all these guys. So it's going to be a different guy each and every week. And
we talked about this though. Remember, we said the answer is there won't be. There's not going to be a guy get to a 20% target share probably on this offense. It's kind of looking like that.
Well, keep running with that thought, Dwayne, because, I'm just about to talk about a certain wide receiver who did seem to still be playing through a little bit of pain with that ankle. But again, based on the routes, one, Allen Lazard was the number 1 receiver, 26 routes. Watkins had 18, Dobbs had 13, Cobb had 12, Watson had 7. But, man, if it's going to be that close still between these guys, I mean, look, Lazard is going to be a probable low-end wide receiver 4 type guy, and everyone drafted him just far higher. So, look, we don't need to keep getting back into, should you or should you not draft Allen Lazard in round 7. I think we've all heard by now that, no, you probably shouldn't have. With that said, Dwayne, based on this and based on Lazard hopefully being healthier moving forward, I'm just still going to have a hard, him versus Garrett Wilson or Drake London, it's not even a question, in my opinion. I'm taking the rookies in that. And Lazard just seems to be the guy for now. So, overall, unbiased thoughts on Allen Lazard the rest of the season. I know you're always unbiased.
No, yeah. I mean, look, hopefully Allen Lazard can turn into a wide receiver 3. I mean, I think that's what you're hoping for. To your point, he was still coming back from an injury tonight. So it's I don't think you can hold all of this against him. He did come away with a touchdown. It was a sweet little sidearm pass from Aaron Rodgers down inside the 2-yard line, where Lazard did a nice job, set up, looked like he was almost about to block or something and didn't know which way he was going to go. And then he, cut inside on the slant, and he and Rodgers were definitely on the same page with that. So good for Allen Lazard. And, a lot of folks that, disagree with my thoughts on Lazard mentioned that, hey, one way potentially Lazard gets there is you just get really good touchdown, equity from him. He just scores a lot of touchdowns. Why don't we say equity? Just he scores a lot of touchdowns. He can score a lot of touchdowns. Back to like the James Jones year, right? Where, they didn't really have a lead guy. And James Jones didn't even get to 1,000 yards receiving, but he scored enough touchdowns to still make him, a nice wide receiver too. So I think that's still the way that if Lazard were to get there, he could pay off. But he is, to your point, clearly the guy out there running the most routes. Aaron Rodgers dropped back to pass 30 times tonight, and Allen Lazard was out there for 27 of those. Sammy Watkins was next at 19. Aaron Jones was behind that at 19, and the rest of the guys were at 15 or lower.
Sick Ari. PFF's Fantasy just stealing my Hill Waddle.
I saw that.
Word for word.
Started.
Come on, man. Be better with that. Like, just, I don't know. It doesn't take that hard to just throw an ad out there.
I just retweeted your tweet.
I like Ari,
That's
but
how
like,
I handled it.
Bro, he tweeted that shit like 2 hours ago. Come on, man. Like, just read the room. I don't let this shit get to me. I just think like, come on, man. Like, this is a little much even for me here, Dwayne, but that's okay. We'll just keep what they say, winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners, right? So on the Bears side of things, Darnell Mooney, 16 routes, Dante Pettis, 14, Equinemius St. Brown, 12, Cole Kmet, 15, Ryan Griffin, 3. Just gross. You're not going to have many freaking, again, receiving yards when your quarterback throws the ball 11 times. We did see Dave Montgomery, though, 33 snaps, just 8 for Khalil Herbert, continuing to really dominate usage. So Dave Montgomery, man, did look good out there. I saw some people just early on in our show saying in the comments that Montgomery was looking good. And sure enough, 122 yards on 15 carries. Why did the Bears give him, this much work in a game that, again, they just weren't really in? They probably needed to pass the ball. I don't know. Wasn't able to watch the second half. We were talking here with you guys, but David Montgomery at least had a nice bounce back after that inefficient week 1. Still have the same sort of questions we talked about in Houston, in Jacksonville. David Montgomery, Dwayne, is he someone that you're looking at more so as an RB3, or do you think he could be just like maybe a slightly worse version than Josh Jacobs and kind of the usage he has right now?
No, I mean, I think I talked about this last week, in my stuff over at PFF and at FantasyLife, just the fact that, I know we don't like Josh Jacobs, but for right now, like, he's getting used a lot. Like, his utilization is actually more in line with what we would think we were getting, from, an RB1. And so I think right now, like, you just got to look at it and you kind of got to, maybe he's going to lose, some of that work. Like, that's totally possible that he ends up losing some of this work, to someone else. But at the end of the day, I just don't see a way where you can keep, David Montgomery out of an RB2 territory. I mean, he was out there for 81% of the snaps tonight, handled 15 out of 19 rushing attempts, handled 11 out of 15 dropbacks where there was one of the 2 backs on the field. Like, he's out there all the time. Like, he's getting all of it. He just needs the Bears. How many times did they drop back to pass? Like, dude, I hardly see any. How many?
It could be Fields had 11.
I think it's 17.
He had 11 pass attempts and 3 sacks, so probably a couple scrambles. And he's at 17. Yeah, that's what I can't figure out.
17? I'm sitting here like refreshing as I'm talking, like trying to buy myself time to refresh.
They were down 24-7.5. Like, their first drive was pretty good.
How did you get down by that much and not throw the ball, drop back to pass more than 17 times? Oh my God. That's insane. It was
starting to rain a bit in the second quarter, but it wasn't anything like week 1. I mean,
yeah. So overall, percentage wise, those are all really good numbers for Herbert. I mean, not for Herbert, for Montgomery, assuming that the Bears can get the offense on track. Like, that's the real question here, is like, can the Bears get the offense on track?
Zach Bates telling us a ton of 3 and outs. That makes sense. And, appreciate you, Zach, helping us out with that. As Greg notes, road game versus Bucs will be a different story in week 3 compared to getting the Bears at home. Another good point, but at least for this week, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, especially Aaron Jones.
What are you doing with Darnell Mooney? Oof. 2 targets, 1 catch for -4 yards.
Man, I hope that the Bears have a different plan to pass the ball, like more so in future weeks. Let's try to get a game that's not impacted by the weather, that's not like in Lambeau, and then see what happens. But yeah, not good at all.
not good, man.
Not good, man, man. All right, Dwayne, we've gone 220 here. I thought we had, whatever. Good time, good shit. We got 2 Monday Night Football games tomorrow night. Always a pleasure, brother. Everyone can find you over at MB Fantasy Life. And, I used to have a much better idea about your work week to week. And, things are changing a little bit, Dwayne. So let the people know exactly what you got over there. And, of course, they can always find you at Dwayne McFarland on the old Twitter sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody knows what I'll be in the bunker working on tomorrow, the utilization report. So you will have the full, all the charts and everything over at PFF, but you will also have, it will be over at FantasyLife as well. And then after that, I am working on my tiers and rankings, which will come out on Wednesday. And then I do my fade smashes. Might change that up a little bit this week, but then also have 2 pods during the week. One, they're both with Marcus Grant from NFL Network. Matthew Berry joins me on Thursday. So lots of fun stuff going on. You guys go check it out over at fantasylife.com.
Slightly new schedule, PFF Fantasy Football Podcast this week. We got our review. I'll be back here Tuesday afternoon / more. It's like 12:30. I kind of consider that morning, but most people say afternoon. My guy, Nathan Yonke, doing waivers. And then I'm going to be talking with Kevin Cole, basically doing a team-by-team breakdown, going through, talking about the matchup, also talking just more about, the things Kevin likes to talk about, being, a pretty analytical mind himself. So not going to have the solo positional previews this week. I'm going to do a little something different. Don't worry. Information will still be getting out there. And as always, you can find the PFF ranks from myself and the rest of the crew, PFF Plus, PFF app on the website, all that, so much more. Yeah, it's a great day to be great. So for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in, everybody. And until next time, take care.